Before we begin, I want you to imagine this happening to you. What would you do? If you enjoy stories that make you think and feel, make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps this channel grow. And tell me in the comments what you would have done.
The church bells rang like a funeral toll as Livia Moretti stood at the altar in a borrowed dress, staring at the man everyone called a monster. Valerio Russo, the name that made grown men lower their voices and mothers lock their doors at night. Her hands trembled as he reached into his jacket, and the crowd gasped, expecting a weapon. Instead, he pulled out a folded document and pressed it into her palms. "You're free to leave," he said quietly, his dark eyes meeting hers. "Anytime. No consequences." The church erupted in confused whispers. What kind of devil offers his bride an escape? If you want to see how Livia's impossible choice unfolds, stay with me until the end. And please, hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The morning of Livia Moretti's wedding day began with her mother's fist against the bedroom door. "Get up!" Elena Moretti's voice cut through the thin walls of their cramped apartment like broken glass. "You think you can hide in there all day? You think I went through all this trouble for nothing?" Livia didn't move from where she sat on the edge of her narrow bed, still wearing yesterday's clothes. She'd stopped crying hours ago. Now there was just numbness, cold and heavy as stone in her chest. "I said get up!" The door shuddered under another blow. "Don't make me come in there, Livia. You know how that ends." Yes, she knew exactly how that ended. The bruises on her ribs, still tender from 3 days ago, reminded her with every breath. Slowly, Livia stood. Her legs felt disconnected from her body, like she was watching herself from somewhere far away. She opened the door. Elena Moretti filled the doorway, 43 years old and worn down to sharp edges. Her face had once been beautiful. Livia had seen the wedding photos tucked in a drawer, but alcohol and bitterness had carved it into something harder. She grabbed Livia's chin, fingers digging in, forcing their eyes to meet. "There's my daughter," Elena said, her breath sour with last night's wine. "My ticket out of this hellhole." Livia said nothing. She'd learned years ago that silence was safer. "Do you know how much money I owe?" Elena released her chin with a small shove. "Do you have any idea what they would have done to me? To us?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "But then, Valerio Russo's people came asking questions about you, asking if you were promised to anyone, and suddenly," she snapped her fingers, "all my debts disappeared, like magic." "You sold me." Livia's voice came out flat, emotionless. "I saved us both." Elena turned away, rifling through the small closet. "You should be grateful. Most girls would kill for this opportunity. Do you know how many women would love to be married to one of the most powerful men in the region? He's a criminal. Everyone says—" The slap came fast, snapping Livia's head to the side. Everyone says, Elena mocked. "What do you know about anything? You're 19 years old and you've never been further than the market square. Valerio Russo is powerful. He's wealthy. And for some reason I will never understand, he chose you." She pulled a white dress from the closet. Not new, probably borrowed or bought secondhand. "So you'll put this on, you'll go to that church, and you'll say, 'I do,' with a smile on your face. Because if you don't—" She didn't finish the threat. She didn't have to. Livia took the dress. The church of Santa Maria stood at the edge of town, its stone walls weathered by centuries of wind and rain. By the time Livia arrived, walking, because her mother had sold their car months ago, the building was already full. She paused outside the heavy wooden doors, the white dress hanging loose on her thin frame. Through the colored glass windows, she could see movement, shadows of people filling the pews. The entire town had come, not to celebrate, to witness. "Are you ready, miss?" Livia turned to find an older man in a simple black suit. His face was kind but careful, the expression of someone who'd learned to keep their thoughts to themselves. "I'm Marco," he said gently. "Mr. Russo sent me to walk you in, if you'd like." "Does he think I'll run?" The words came out more bitter than she intended. Marco's expression didn't change. "He thinks you might want someone on your side." Something about that broke through the numbness. Livia looked at this stranger, this employee of the man she was being forced to marry, and saw something unexpected. Sympathy. "I don't have a side," she said quietly. "Everyone has a side, miss, even when they don't know it yet." He offered his arm. "Shall we?" Livia looked back at the street one last time. She could run, just turn and run and keep running until her legs gave out. But then what? Her mother would find her. Or worse, Valerio Russo's people would. And either way, the outcome would be the same. She took Marco's arm. The doors opened and the church fell silent. Livia had expected many things, but not this. The pews were packed. Shopkeepers and farmers, teachers and tradesmen, people she'd known her entire life. But no one was smiling. They stared at her with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity, like mourners at a funeral. Because that's what this was, wasn't it? The funeral of her freedom, her future, her choice. The aisle stretched endlessly before her. At the far end, standing before the altar, was Valerio Russo. She'd seen him once before, 2 years ago, when his car had driven through town. He'd been in the back seat, just a silhouette behind tinted glass, but that had been enough to spark weeks of gossip. Now, seeing him clearly for the first time, Livia understood why people feared him. Valerio Russo was tall, perhaps 6'2", with dark hair and darker eyes. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than her mother's entire apartment. His face was handsome in a sharp, dangerous way, strong jaw, straight nose, full mouth set in a serious line. He stood completely still, hands clasped in front of him, watching her approach with an expression she couldn't read. He looked powerful, controlled. Exactly like the kind of man who could make people disappear. Livia's steps faltered. Marco's hand tightened slightly on her arm. "Steady, miss, just a bit further." The walk down the aisle felt like drowning. Every step took effort. Every breath burned. The whispers followed her like waves. "Poor girl. So young. Her mother sold her, you know." "What kind of mother?" "Shh. His men are everywhere." Finally, they reached the altar. Marco carefully transferred her hand to Valerio's, and the contact sent a shock through her system. His hand was warm, his grip gentle but firm. Not cruel, not painful, just steady. "Hello, Livia?" His voice was deep and quiet, meant only for her. "Are you all right?" The question was so unexpected that she actually looked up at him. His dark eyes met hers, and she saw something that confused her even more. Concern. Her voice cracked. "I don't want this." "I know." The priest cleared his throat nervously. Father Antonio was 60 years old and had baptized Livia as a baby. Now he stood between them with his prayer book, his hands shaking slightly as he opened it. "We are gathered here today," he began, but Valerio held up one hand. "Before we continue," Valerio said, his voice carrying through the silent church, "there's something that needs to be done first." He reached into his jacket. The congregation gasped. Someone in the back screamed. 3 men in dark suits who'd been standing along the walls moved slightly, hands inside their own jackets, and the crowd pressed back in their pews. But Valerio only pulled out a folded document. He held it for a moment, looking down at Livia. "This is a legal contract," he said clearly, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Prepared by my attorneys and notarized by the magistrate. It states that you, Livia Moretti, enter this marriage of your own free will and maintain the absolute right to leave it at any time, for any reason, with no consequences, no obligations, and no interference from me or anyone associated with me." The church erupted. "What? Did he just... That's not... impossible." Valerio ignored them all. He unfolded the document and held it out to Livia. "Read it. Take your time." Livia's hand shook as she took the papers. The legal language was dense, but Marco stepped closer and pointed to specific paragraphs, helping her understand. It was exactly what Valerio had said. The contract guaranteed her freedom, complete unconditional freedom. She could leave the marriage immediately after the ceremony. She could leave tomorrow, next week, next year, whenever she chose. The document promised no retaliation, no pursuit, no consequences of any kind. It even included a substantial financial settlement that would be hers regardless of when or why she left. "I don't understand." Livia whispered. You don't have to understand, you just have to know it's real. Valerio gestured to someone in the front pew, and an elderly man in an expensive suit stood up. This is Magistrate Conti. He notarized the document this morning and will witness your acceptance of it now, if you choose to accept it. Magistrate Conti nodded, his official seal visible on the papers in Livia's hands. Why? The word came out broken. Why would you do this? Valerio's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Because no one should be forced into anything, including this. But my mother, the debts are paid, regardless of what you decide right now. He paused. The marriage contract is separate from the debt settlement. Your mother's obligations are resolved. You owe me nothing, Livia. This, he gestured between them, is entirely your choice. The church had gone completely silent. Livia looked around at the faces of her town, these people who'd watched her grow up, who'd seen her mother's slow descent into cruelty and addiction, who'd looked away when Livia came to school with bruises. They were all staring now, waiting to see what she would do. She looked down at the document in her hands. Freedom. Real, legal, guaranteed freedom. But freedom to what? To go back to that cramped apartment where her mother's rage waited? To try to survive alone in a town that had never protected her? To be 19 and powerless and invisible? Or freedom to choose something different, even if she didn't understand it yet? If I sign this, Livia said slowly, and I go through with the marriage, what happens then? Then you come with me to my home. You'll have your own room, your own space. I won't touch you without your permission. I won't demand anything from you. You'll be free to spend your days however you choose. Valerio's tone remained steady, patient. And if at any point you decide you want to leave, you take this document to Magistrate Conti, and it will be honored immediately. You're asking me to trust you? No. He met her eyes. I'm asking you to trust the law. I'm asking you to trust a legally binding contract that gives you power over your own future. Whether you trust me or not is irrelevant. Livia looked at the document again, at the official seal, at the clear, specific language guaranteeing her rights. She thought about what her mother had said that morning. I saved us both. No. Her mother had saved herself and sold her daughter to do it. But this man, this feared, powerful criminal, was offering her something her own mother never had. A choice. Do you have a pen? Livia asked. Magistrate Conti produced one immediately. Livia spread the document on the altar rail, her hands steadier now, and signed her name in 3 places. The magistrate witnessed each signature, adding his own seal and notation. When it was done, Valerio carefully folded the document and handed it back to Livia. This is yours. Keep it somewhere safe. She clutched it to her chest like a lifeline. Father Antonio, who had been watching all of this with wide eyes, cleared his throat. Should I continue? Valerio looked at Livia. Should he? And there it was again, the choice, always the choice. Livia thought about the apartment, about her mother's fists and the broken promises and the years of being invisible. She thought about the townspeople watching her with pity, but never helping. She thought about being 19 with no money, no education beyond high school, no prospects beyond waiting tables at the cafe where men twice her age made comments about her body. She looked at Valerio Russo, this man she didn't know, who'd just given her more power than she'd ever had in her life. Yes, she said. Continue. The ceremony was brief. Father Antonio rushed through the words, stumbling over passages he'd recited 100 times before. When it came time for the rings, Valerio produced a simple gold band, no diamonds, no ostentation, and slipped it onto Livia's finger with the same careful gentleness he'd shown throughout. You may kiss the bride, Father Antonio said, then immediately added, if she consents. Valerio didn't move. He simply looked at Livia, the question clear in his eyes. She shook her head slightly. He nodded. Then we're done here. No kiss, no triumphant claim of possession, just a simple acknowledgement of boundaries. They turned to face the congregation, and Livia saw her mother in the 3rd row. Elena was smiling, but it was the satisfied smile of someone who'd just closed a profitable deal. When she caught Livia's eye, she raised her glass, already drinking, even in church, in a mocking toast. Something cold settled in Livia's stomach. This was the last time she'd see that face, the last time she'd feel that particular fear. "Ready?" Valerio asked quietly. "Yes." They walked down the aisle together. The crowd parted like water, people pressing back into the pews to avoid getting too close. No one threw rice. No one cheered. They simply watched as Livia Moretti, now Livia Russo, at least on paper, left the church on the arm of the most dangerous man in the region. Outside, a black car waited. Not a limousine, not ostentatious, just a well-maintained luxury sedan. Marco held the door open, and Livia slid into the leather interior. Valerio settled beside her, maintaining a careful distance. As the car pulled away from the church, Livia looked back one final time at the town where she'd spent every day of her 19 years. No one waved goodbye. The drive took 40 minutes, winding through hills covered in cypress trees and olive groves. Livia watched the landscape change, moving from the cramped streets of her town to open countryside. She'd seen these hills from a distance all her life, but had never traveled through them. "Are you hungry?" Valerio asked. He'd been silent for the first 20 minutes, seemingly content to let her process. "No." "Thirsty?" "No." "Terrified?" She turned to look at him. His expression was serious, but not unkind. "Yes," she admitted. "That's understandable." He gestured to the document still clutched in her hands. "But I meant what I said, every word of it. You're free to leave whenever you choose." "You keep saying that, but I don't understand why. What do you get from this?" Valerio was quiet for a moment, looking out the window. "Peace of mind," he said finally, "and perhaps a chance to do something right." "By marrying a stranger?" "By giving that stranger a choice she wouldn't have had otherwise." He turned back to her. "Your mother sold you to settle her debts, Livia. I paid those debts, yes, but I also gave you the legal means to escape her completely. Whether you stay married to me for a day or a decade, you're no longer under her control. That document makes sure of it. You could have just paid off the debts without the marriage." "I could have, but then your mother would have found another way to use you. Another debt, another deal. This way, you're legally protected. As my wife, on paper at least, you have rights and resources she can't touch." Livia absorbed this, trying to find the angle, the trap. There had to be one. No one did something this significant without wanting something in return. "What happens when we get to your home?" she asked. "Marco will show you to your room. You can rest, clean up, eat if you want. There are books in the library, a garden if you prefer to be outside. Tomorrow, someone will take you into the city to buy whatever you need, clothes, personal items, anything. Just tell them what you want." "And you?" "I have work to do, businesses to run." He paused. "I won't bother you, Livia. Your space is yours." The car turned off the main road onto a private drive lined with tall poplar trees. In the distance, Livia could see a villa, pale stone walls, terracotta roof, surrounded by manicured gardens. It looked like something from a travel magazine, beautiful and utterly foreign to her experience. "This is where you live?" she asked. "This is where we live," Valerio corrected gently. "At least for now." The car stopped in front of the main entrance. Marco opened the door, and Livia stepped out onto gravel pathways that crunched under her borrowed shoes. The air smelled different here, cleaner, touched with lavender and rosemary from the garden beds. A woman appeared in the doorway, perhaps 50 years old, wearing a simple gray dress and apron. Her face was warm, open, immediately kind in a way that made Livia's throat tighten. "This is Sofia," Valerio said. "She manages the household. If you need anything at all, ask her." "Welcome, Mrs. Russo." Sophia's smile was genuine. "I've prepared the blue room for you. I hope you'll find it comfortable." Mrs. Russo. The name felt strange, like a costume that didn't fit. "Thank you," Livia managed. "Sophia will show you around," Valerio said. "I'll be in my office if you need anything. Otherwise," he met Livia's eyes. "I'll see you at dinner if you'd like to join me. Or Sophia can bring a tray to your room if you prefer privacy." Another choice. Always another choice. I'll let you know," Livia said. Valerio nodded, already turning toward a corridor that led deeper into the house. Marco followed him, and Livia was left with Sophia and the strange, careful kindness in her eyes. "Come," Sophia said gently. "Let me show you your new home." Itching. The blue room was 3 times the size of Livia's entire bedroom at her mother's apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the gardens, gauzy curtains filtering the afternoon sunlight into something soft and dreamlike. The furniture was simple but elegant. A large bed with white linens, a wooden dresser, a desk with a reading lamp, a door that led to a private bathroom. "There are clothes in the closet," Sophia explained, opening the doors to reveal several simple dresses, pants, and shirts in various sizes. "Just temporary until you can get your own things. Mr. Russo wanted to make sure you had options." Livia ran her hand over a soft cotton dress in pale green. "He thought of everything. He's very thorough." Sophia's tone was carefully neutral. "The bathroom has everything you might need, towels, toiletries, all fresh. There's a lock on the bedroom door." She pointed to a brass deadbolt. "Inside and out. Only you have the key." Livia looked at the lock, then at Sophia. "He really meant it, about my privacy. Mr. Russo always means what he says." Sophia moved toward the door. "I'll leave you to rest. Dinner is at 7 if you'd like to join us in the dining room, or I can bring something to you here, whatever you prefer." "Sophia?" Livia's voice stopped her at the threshold. "Why did he do this? Really?" The older woman's expression shifted, sadness flickering across her kind features. "That's his story to tell, dear, not mine." She paused. "But I can tell you this. Mr. Russo is not the man people say he is. He's done things he's not proud of, certainly. This life requires difficult choices. But he's not cruel, and he doesn't take what isn't freely given." She left, closing the door softly behind her. Livia stood in the center of the blue room, still clutching the legal document, and finally let herself feel the full weight of what had just happened. She'd walked into a church expecting to be trapped, and had walked out with freedom. She'd married a man everyone called a monster, and been given privacy, security, and choice. None of it made sense. She moved to the window, looking out at gardens she was apparently free to explore, at grounds that stretched far beyond what she could see. Somewhere in this villa, Valerio Russo was working, running whatever empire required his attention, leaving her alone exactly as he'd promised. Livia unfolded the legal document one more time, reading through the clauses that guaranteed her autonomy. Her eyes caught on one section she'd missed before, a paragraph near the end. "In the event of dissolution of this marriage at the request of Livia Russo, née Moretti, all property and assets accumulated during the marriage will be divided equally, regardless of duration. Additionally, a trust has been established in her name, inaccessible to any party including Valerio Russo, which will provide financial security sufficient for independent living." He'd set up a trust fund. For her. Before they'd even met. Livia's hand shook as she refolded the document. She walked to the desk, opened the top drawer, and carefully placed the papers inside. Then she locked the drawer and slipped the small key into her pocket. For the first time in years, maybe in her whole life, she had something that belonged only to her. Not something her mother could take or sell or destroy in a rage. Not something that could be used against her. Freedom. Real, tangible, documented freedom. Livia sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the softness of the mattress, so different from the thin, worn thing she'd slept on for years. The afternoon sun painted the room in shades of gold. Somewhere in the house, she could hear faint sounds, footsteps, voices, the normal rhythms of life continuing. She was married to Valerio Russo, and she was free. The contradiction didn't make sense, but as she lay back on the bed, feeling the exhaustion of the day finally catch up with her, Livia realized something. She didn't have to understand it yet. She just had to survive it one day at a time, making one choice at a time, until she figured out what kind of life she wanted to build with this unexpected gift. Livia woke to darkness and the sound of gentle knocking. "Mrs. Russo?" Sophia's voice, soft and apologetic. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but it's nearly 7. I wanted to check if you'd like dinner." Livia sat up, disoriented. She'd slept for hours, the exhaustion of weeks of stress finally catching up with her. Yes, thank you. Would you like to join Mr. Russo in the dining room, or shall I bring something here?" The choice again. Livia looked at the locked door, at the safe space she'd been given. She could hide here. It would be easy, expected even. But hiding wouldn't give her answers. "I'll join him," Livia said. Just give me a few minutes? Of course, take your time. Livia washed her face in the bathroom, huge and beautiful, with marble counters and soft towels and water pressure that didn't sputter and die. She changed into one of the dresses from the closet, the pale green one that actually fit reasonably well. Then she stood before the mirror, barely recognizing the girl looking back. Mrs. Russo. Livia Russo. She still had the document. She could still leave. But first she needed to understand. Sophia was waiting in the hallway to guide her through the villa's corridors. They passed rooms with open doors, a library filled with books, a sitting room with comfortable furniture, a music room with a piano. Everything was elegant but not ostentatious, comfortable rather than cold. The dining room was smaller than Livia expected, intimate rather than grand. A wooden table set for two, candles providing soft light, windows that looked out on the garden where twilight was settling. Valerio stood when she entered. He'd changed from his wedding suit into dark slacks and a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Somehow, dressed down, he looked less intimidating. "Thank you for joining me," he said. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure either," Livia admitted. He moved to pull out a chair for her, and she noticed he was careful not to stand too close, not to crowd her space. Every movement seemed calculated to put her at ease. Sophia appeared with the first course, a simple salad with fresh vegetables and a light vinaigrette. Then she disappeared, leaving them alone. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Livia was hyper-aware of every sound, the clink of silverware, the rustle of napkins, her own breathing. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. "Why aren't you asking me questions?" she blurted out. Valerio looked up from his plate. "What questions would you like me to ask?" "I don't know. About me. About whether I'm going to stay. About anything. You married me and you know nothing about me. I know you're 19. I know you've lived in that town your whole life. I know your mother has spent the last 5 years descending into alcoholism and debt, and that she took her failures out on you." His tone remained even, factual. "I know you worked at the cafe to try to help with bills, and that you gave up your plans for university because there was no money. I know you're stronger than you think you are." Livia set down her fork, her appetite vanishing. "You investigated me." "Of course I did. I don't make blind decisions, Livia, especially not ones that involve another person's life." "So you knew about—" She gestured vaguely, unable to name it. "The abuse?" "Yes." Something hard flickered in his eyes. "That's why I made the offer." "I don't understand. You're a—" She caught herself. "A criminal?" He said it without shame. "Yes. I run businesses that operate outside the law. I work with dangerous people. I've done things that would shock you. But I have rules, Livia. Lines I don't cross." He paused. "And I don't tolerate the abuse of people who can't defend themselves." "So this is— what? Charity?" "This is me trying to do one right thing in a life full of wrong ones." Valerio's expression was unreadable. "You were trapped. I had the means to free you. It's that simple." "Nothing is that simple." "You're right, but sometimes it can be." He resumed eating, giving her space to process. "Tell me something, Livia. What did you want to do? Before everything with your mother became unbearable?" The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in years. "I wanted to study literature, maybe teach someday. I loved books, stories, poetry, the way words could build entire worlds." She looked down at her hands. "Stupid dream for someone like me." "Why is it stupid?" "Because people like me don't get those kinds of lives. We survive, that's all." "And now?" Valerio asked quietly. "What if you didn't just have to survive?" Livia met his eyes across the table. "Is that what this is? You giving me a chance at dreams? I'm giving you time and safety. What you do with them is entirely up to you." He gestured toward the house around them. "There are 3,000 books in the library. Take any of them. Read all of them. There's a university in the city, 40 minutes from here. If you want to enroll, I'll make the arrangements. If you want to do nothing but sit in the garden for the next year, that's fine too." "Why?" The question came out almost as a plea. "Why do you care what I do?" Valerio was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard before. Because someone should have cared a long time ago, and no one did. Because you deserved better than what you got. And because, he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully, because I know what it's like to be powerless. I know what it's like to watch someone suffer and not be able to stop it. There was pain in that statement, old and deep. Livia wanted to ask, wanted to understand, but something in his expression warned her not to push. Not yet. Sophia returned with the main course: roasted chicken, vegetables, fresh bread. They ate mostly in silence, but it was a different kind of silence now. Less uncomfortable, almost peaceful. As dessert was cleared away, Valerio stood. I have some work to finish. Feel free to explore the house, the grounds, whatever you'd like. If you need anything, Sophia or Marco can help you. He started to leave, then turned back. Livia? Tomorrow. A woman named Teresa will come. She's a seamstress. She'll take measurements and help you order a proper wardrobe. It's not a request, he added when he saw her about to protest. You need clothes that fit and belong to you. Let me do this one thing. Before she could respond, he was gone. Livia sat alone in the dining room, candlelight flickering across the empty plates. She thought about the library with 3,000 books, about a university 40 minutes away, about a man who investigated her past and responded not with judgment, but with freedom. She stood slowly and made her way back through the corridors, but instead of returning to her room, she found herself at the library door. The room was exactly as she'd glimpsed earlier: floor-to-ceiling shelves, comfortable chairs, lamps providing warm pools of light. Livia walked to the nearest shelf and ran her fingers along the spines. Poetry, novels, philosophy, history. Some in Italian, some in English, some in languages she didn't recognize. All organized, cared for, waiting. She pulled out a worn copy of Dante's Inferno and sank into one of the leather chairs. The book fell open to a passage someone had underlined. In the middle of the journey of our life, I found myself in a dark wood, for the straight way was lost. Livia read the words again, feeling their weight, lost in a dark wood. That had been her whole life until this morning. But now? Now she was in a strange house with a strange man who'd given her the keys to her own cage. She didn't know if she could trust him, didn't know if this was real or some elaborate trap she couldn't see yet. But she had the legal document locked in her desk drawer. She had choices. She had time. And for tonight, she had 3,000 books and no one telling her she couldn't read them. Livia curled up in the chair and began to read, the words washing over her like a promise of something she'd almost forgotten to hope for. The possibility that tomorrow might be different than yesterday. That sometimes, lost in the dark wood, you find an unexpected path forward. That freedom, real freedom, feels like the weight of the world lifting, and like the terrifying responsibility of having to decide what to do next. Outside the library windows, night settled over the villa. Somewhere in the house, Valerio Russo was working, conducting whatever dark business required his attention. But here, in this quiet room full of stories, Livia allowed herself to simply exist without fear. It was a small thing, perhaps, but it was hers. And tomorrow, she would wake up and make another choice. And another after that. One day at a time. One decision at a time. Until she figured out who Livia Russo could become when given the chance to be more than just a survivor. The candles burned low as she read, and eventually Sophia appeared to check on her. "Would you like me to walk you back to your room, dear?" the older woman asked gently. Livia looked up from the book, surprised to find tears on her cheeks. She wiped them away quickly. "Yes, thank you." As they walked through the quiet corridors, Sophia spoke softly. "It's a lot to take in, I know. This whole day." "Does it get easier?" Livia asked, understanding him. Sophia smiled. "Mr. Russo is complicated, but he's consistent. Once you learn his patterns, his rules, you'll find he's exactly who he says he is. No more, no less." "And who is that?" Someone trying to be better than his circumstances required him to be. Sophia stopped outside the blue room. Someone who believes everyone deserves a second chance, even if they don't believe it themselves. She said goodnight and left Livia at her door. Inside, the room was exactly as she'd left it, unchanged, private, safe. Livia locked the door behind her, changed into the soft pajamas she found in the dresser, and climbed into bed. The sheets smelled like lavender. The pillow was soft. Outside the window, she could hear crickets and the rustle of wind through trees. No shouting, no breaking glass, no footsteps she had to fear, just silence and safety, and the weight of choices she'd never had before. Livia fell asleep with the legal document still in her desk drawer, and Dante's words still echoing in her mind. Lost in a dark wood, but maybe, just maybe, finding her way out. Livia woke to sunlight streaming through the gauze curtains and the sound of birdsong. For a disoriented moment, she didn't know where she was. The ceiling was too high, the bed too soft, the air too clean. Then memory flooded back. The church, the document, Valerio's dark eyes watching her sign her name. She sat up slowly, half expecting yesterday to have been a dream. But the blue room was still here, still real. The pale green dress she'd worn to dinner hung over a chair. The locked desk drawer still held her freedom in paper form. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Mrs. Russo?" Sophia's voice came through the door. "I've brought breakfast if you're awake." Livia quickly pulled on a robe she found hanging in the bathroom and unlocked the door. Sophia entered with a tray, fresh coffee, warm bread, fruit, soft cheese, and set it on the small table by the window. "Did you sleep well?" Sophia asked, opening the curtains wider. "Better than I have in years." The admission felt vulnerable somehow. "Good. You needed it." Sophia poured the coffee with practiced ease. "Teresa the seamstress will be here at 10. Mr. Russo has already left for the city on business, but he asked me to tell you that Marco will drive you anywhere you'd like to go this afternoon. The shops, the library in town, wherever." "He's gone?" Livia wasn't sure if she felt relieved or disappointed. "He leaves early most mornings. His work requires it." Sophia's tone suggested this was normal, expected. "But he'll be back for dinner if you'd like to join him again. He enjoyed your company last night." "How could you possibly know that?" Sophia smiled. "Because he actually came to dinner. Usually he eats in his office, too busy to bother with the dining room. Last night he set aside 2 hours just to sit with you." She moved toward the door. "That means something, dear." After Sophia left, Livia ate slowly, watching the gardens through the window. She could see Marco walking the grounds with another man, both of them talking quietly. Guards, probably. Or whatever Valerio called the men who protected his property. Protected her now. The thought was strange. She'd spent her whole life unprotected, and now she lived in a house with security, locked doors, and a man whose reputation made people cross the street. At precisely 10 o'clock, Sophia returned with Teresa, a woman in her 50s with measuring tape around her neck and sharp, assessing eyes that softened when she looked at Livia. "So you're the bride everyone's talking about," Teresa said, setting down a large bag of fabric samples. "The girl Valerio Russo married, and then gave an escape clause." "News travels fast," Livia said carefully. "In our world, always." Teresa pulled out her measuring tape. "Arms out, please. Let's see what we're working with." As Teresa took measurements, she kept up a steady stream of conversation. "I've been making clothes for Mr. Russo's household for 15 years. Good man, despite what people say. Pays on time, never argues about prices, and treats my daughter with respect when she helps with deliveries." She noted something in a small notebook. "You're thin. Too thin. But we'll fix that with the right cuts, make you look healthy instead of starved." "I'm not starved," Livia protested. Teresa gave her a look that said she wasn't fooled. "I've seen enough girls from situations like yours to know the signs. But you're safe now, and Sophia's cooking will put meat on your bones soon enough." She held up several fabric samples. "Now, what colors do you like?" They spent an hour going through options: day dresses and evening wear, casual clothes, and something Teresa called town appropriate, for when Livia needed to look like she belonged to Valerio Russo's world. Livia tried to argue about the cost, but Teresa waved her off. Mr. Russo's instructions were clear: a complete wardrobe, no expense spared, everything tailored perfectly. He was very specific that you should have choices, not just 1 or 2 outfits, but enough that you never feel limited. "He thinks of everything," Livia murmured. "He does," Teresa agreed. "Sometimes it unnerves people, how thorough he is. But I find it reassuring. A man who pays attention to details is a man who keeps his promises." After Teresa left with pages of measurements and fabric selections, Livia found herself restless. The blue room felt too small suddenly, too isolated. She needed to move, to explore. to understand the boundaries of this new life. She dressed in jeans and a simple shirt from the temporary wardrobe and ventured out into the villa. In daylight, she could see details she'd missed the night before: artwork on the walls, fresh flowers in vases, the way sunlight painted everything in warm gold. It was beautiful, but not cold. Lived in. The library drew her again. She spent an hour just browsing, pulling books at random, reading first pages. The collection was eclectic: classic literature beside modern thrillers, philosophy next to poetry, history mixed with science. Someone had built this collection with care, choosing books to be read rather than displayed. He started collecting them about 10 years ago. Livia spun around to find Marco standing in the doorway, his expression apologetic for startling her. "Mr. Russo," Marco clarified. "The books. After his sister died, he started buying them. Said he wanted to fill the house with stories she'd never get to read." His sister. The pain Livia had glimpsed in Valerio's eyes the night before suddenly made more sense. "What happened to her?" she asked quietly. Marco's face closed off. "That's his story to tell, Mrs. Russo, not mine." He shifted his weight. "I came to see if you'd like that drive into town. Sophia mentioned you might want to visit the shops or the library." Livia looked at the book in her hands, a collection of Neruda's poetry, and carefully returned it to the shelf. "Yes, I'd like that." The drive into the city revealed a world Livia had only glimpsed in passing. Her town had been small, provincial, trapped in routines that never changed. But this city, 40 minutes from the villa, was alive with movement and possibility. Marco parked near a plaza surrounded by shops and cafes. "I'll be right here," he said. "Take your time. If you need anything, I'm a phone call away." He handed her a cell phone. "Mr. Russo had this set up for you. My number's already programmed." Livia stared at the phone, another gift, another piece of independence. "I've never had my own phone before," she admitted. Marco's expression gentled. "Well, now you do. Go explore, Mrs. Russo. The city's safe during the day, and everyone knows Mr. Russo's car. No one will bother you." She stepped out onto the cobblestone plaza, and for the first time in her life, Livia was completely alone in a place her mother didn't know, couldn't follow, had no power. The sensation was dizzying. She wandered through bookshops, running her fingers over spines she could now afford to buy. She stopped at a cafe and ordered an espresso, sitting at an outdoor table and watching people pass. Students with backpacks, mothers with children, business people on lunch breaks, all of them living lives that had seemed impossibly distant just yesterday. A university poster on a nearby wall caught her eye. "Spring enrollment open. Literature, arts, sciences." The application deadline was 3 weeks away. Livia pulled out the phone Marco had given her and took a picture of the poster before she could talk herself out of it. "Livia?" The voice froze her blood. She turned slowly to find her mother standing 3 feet away, shopping bags in hand, eyes already calculating. "I thought that was you," Elena said, her smile sharp. "My daughter, sitting at a cafe in the city like she belongs here. How quickly you've adjusted to spending Russo money." "What are you doing here?" Livia's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Shopping, obviously. Now that my debts are paid, I can actually afford things again." Elena set down her bags and pulled out a chair uninvited. "We should talk. We have nothing to talk about." "Don't we?" Elena leaned forward. "You think you're free of me now? You think that piece of paper makes you untouchable?" She laughed, and the sound made Livia's stomach turn. "You're still my daughter, still naive little Livia who needs her mother's guidance. I don't need anything from you." "Really? Because from where I'm sitting, you've landed in a situation you don't understand with a man you know nothing about. How long do you think Valerio Russo's generosity will last? Men like him don't give without expecting something in return." "He's given me more freedom than you ever did." Elena's smile faded. "Is that what you think? That I was the villain in your story?" Her voice dropped, vicious. "I kept a roof over your head. I fed you. I didn't abandon you when your father died and left us with nothing. You have no idea what I sacrificed. You hit me." The words came out quiet but final. "You sold me to pay debts you created. You turned me into a transaction." "I saved you from poverty," Elena hissed. "Do Do you know what happens to girls like you without protection, without connections? You would have ended up working in some factory, pregnant by 20, trapped in exactly the kind of life I had. Instead, you're married to one of the most powerful men in the region. You should be thanking me." Livia stood, her hands shaking. "I'll never thank you, and this conversation is over. Sit down. We're not finished." "Yes, we are." Livia gathered her things. "I'm not yours anymore. The law says so. If you contact me again, I'll have that documented too." She walked away, half expecting her mother to follow, to make a scene. But when she glanced back, Elena was still sitting at the table, watching her with an expression that mixed fury and something else. Fear, maybe. Or the realization that her leverage was truly gone. Livia made it back to the car before her composure cracked. Marco took one look at her face and opened the door without questions. "Home?" he asked gently. She nodded, not trusting her voice. The drive back was silent. Livia watched the landscape blur past, trying to stop shaking. She'd stood up to her mother, actually stood up and walked away. It should have felt triumphant, but mostly she just felt sick. When they arrived at the villa, Marco spoke quietly. "Mr. Russo should know about this, about your mother approaching you." "Why? It was just a conversation." "Because that's how it starts. A conversation, then another, then demands, then threats." Marco's voice was kind but firm. "Mr. Russo gave you freedom, but part of protecting that freedom is making sure no one tries to take it back." Livia thought about Elena's calculating eyes, the way she'd tried to plant doubt about Valerio's intentions. "Will he be angry?" "No, but he'll want to make sure you're protected." Sophia met them at the door, took one look at Livia's pale face, and immediately wrapped her in a hug that felt like safety itself. "What happened?" she asked. "Her mother," Marco said quietly. Sophia's expression hardened. "Come on, dear, let's get you some tea." Livia let herself be led to a sunroom she hadn't discovered yet, all windows and comfortable furniture and plants growing in terracotta pots. Sophia settled her into a chair and disappeared, returning quickly with tea and small pastries. "Eat," Sophia ordered gently. "You're shaking." Livia obeyed, the sweetness of the pastry grounding her somehow. "I thought I'd feel stronger, after yesterday, after signing that document. But when I saw her, I was 19 again and terrified." "Strength isn't about never being afraid," Sophia said. "It's about being afraid and doing what you need to anyway. You walked away from her. That took courage." She said Valerio would expect something eventually, that men like him always do. Sophia was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "I've worked for Mr. Russo for 12 years. I've seen him make difficult decisions, do questionable things in the name of business. But I've never seen him take advantage of someone weaker." She poured more tea. "He gave you that contract because he meant every word. And if your mother tries to convince you otherwise, she's just trying to manipulate you back into her control." "How do you know?" "Because I knew his sister." Sophia's voice went soft. "Julia. She was 17 when she died. Beautiful, smart, full of life, and completely powerless against the man who hurt her." Livia set down her cup. "What happened?" "Their father was violent, especially when he drank. Valerio was 22, just starting to build his business, trying to earn enough to get Julia away from that house, but he wasn't fast enough." Sophia's eyes were distant, remembering. "She died 3 days after her father beat her so badly, her injuries couldn't be fixed. Valerio found her, held her while she died." The image made Livia's throat tight. "That's why he did this. Why he married me. He sees Julia in every girl trapped by someone stronger. And he can't save his sister, but he tries to save others." Sophia met Livia's eyes. "So no, dear, he doesn't expect anything from you. He just can't bear to watch another girl suffer when he has the power to stop it." They sat in silence while Livia absorbed this. The feared Mafia leader who made people tremble was driven by grief and guilt, trying to redeem himself one rescue at a time. "What happened to their father?" she asked quietly. Sophia's expression went carefully blank. "He's no longer a problem." The implication hung in the air. Livia should have been horrified. She was, a little, but mostly she felt a strange understanding. Valerio had failed to save his sister, so he'd made sure his father could never hurt anyone else. Justice, perhaps, or vengeance. In this world, maybe they were the same thing. Evening was settling over the villa when Livia heard the front door open and Valerio's voice speaking quietly to someone. She'd spent the afternoon in the sunroom, reading and thinking, trying to sort through everything she'd learned. She found him in his office, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up, paper spread across a massive desk. He looked tired but focused, completely absorbed in whatever work required his attention. Livia knocked on the open door frame. He looked up and his expression immediately shifted from concentration to concern. Sophia told me what happened. Are you all right? I'm fine. She just talked to me, that's all. Valerio set down his pen and gestured to a chair across from his desk. Sit, please. Livia settled into the leather chair, noticing the way his office reflected the same careful balance as the rest of the house. Functional but comfortable, powerful but not oppressive. Tell me exactly what she said, Valerio prompted. Livia recounted the conversation, watching his expression grow darker with each detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. She tried to undermine your trust in me, he said finally, make you doubt the contract. Yes. Did it work? Livia met his eyes. Sophia told me about your sister. Something flickered across Valerio's face, pain, quickly controlled. Did she? I'm sorry for what happened to her, but I'm glad I know why you did this. It makes more sense now. Does it? He leaned back in his chair. I'm still the man people fear, Livia. Still a criminal who's done terrible things. Knowing why I married you doesn't change what I am. No, but it changes what you're trying to be. She paused. My mother was wrong. You don't expect anything from me. That's the problem. She can't comprehend someone giving without demanding something in return. What she comprehends or doesn't is irrelevant. The question is whether she'll continue trying to contact you. Probably. Then I'll make sure she understands the consequences if she does. Valerio's voice went cold. Your mother made a deal. I paid her debts, and in return, she signed documents transferring all legal guardianship and familial rights to me. She has no claim on you anymore, Livia. None. If she approaches you again, she's in breach of contract. What happens if she breaches it? Then I take back everything I gave her. The debt payments are reversed, and she'll owe more than she can ever repay. His expression was granite. Trust me when I say she won't risk that. You thought of everything. I had to. Women like your mother always come back for more unless the consequences are severe enough to make them stop. He picked up his pen again, then set it down. I'm sorry you had to see her. I'd hoped to give you more time before dealing with your past. It's fine. I handled it. You did. Sophia said you walked away without engaging her manipulations. That takes strength. The compliment warmed something in Livia's chest. I had a good teacher. You showed me it was possible to say no. They looked at each other across the desk, and Livia felt the dynamic between them shifting slightly. Less stranger and victim. More something else. She wasn't sure what yet. Have you eaten? Valerio asked, breaking the moment. Not since the pastries Sophia brought. Then we'll have dinner. Give me 15 minutes to finish this, and I'll meet you in the dining room. Livia stood to leave, then turned back. Valerio? Thank you for protecting me from her. You didn't have to go that far. Yes, he said quietly. I did. Dinner that night was different from the first. They talked more, the conversation flowing easier. Valerio asked about her day, and she told him about the bookshops and the university poster. He listened with genuine interest, asking questions about what subjects she'd want to study. Literature and writing, Livia said. I used to fill notebooks with stories when I was younger, before my mother found them and threw them away. Why did she throw them away? She said I was wasting time on fantasies when I should be focused on reality. Livia pushed food around her plate. She was probably right. She was wrong. Valerio's tone was firm. Stories matter. They're how we make sense of the world, how we preserve truth and beauty in the face of ugliness. Your mother destroyed your notebooks because she wanted to destroy your hope. The insight struck deep. Livia had never thought of it that way. But he was right. Elena hadn't just thrown away paper. She'd tried to eliminate any evidence that Livia dreamed of more. The application deadline is in 3 weeks, she said quietly. Then you have 3 weeks to decide if it's what you want. Valerio met her eyes. But Livia, if you want it, take it. Don't let your mother's voice in your head make that decision for you. After dinner, Valerio surprised her by inviting her to the music room. Do you play? He asked, gesturing to the piano. No, my mother couldn't afford lessons. Would you like to learn? I don't know. He sat at the piano bench and played a simple melody, his hands moving over the keys with unexpected grace. Music was Julia's gift. She could hear something once and play it perfectly. His voice went distant. After she died, I couldn't come in this room for years. Couldn't bear to hear the silence where her music used to be. But you kept the piano. I kept everything. This whole villa is a monument to her, really. Every book I buy, every beautiful thing I collect, it's all what she would have loved if she'd lived long enough. He played another few notes. Grief is strange that way. You build a life around the shape of what's missing. Livia sat beside him on the bench, careful to maintain distance. Is that what I am? Another piece of the monument? No? He stopped playing and looked at her. You're something entirely different. Julia was my failure. You're my chance to not fail again. That's a lot of pressure. Is it? I'm not asking you to fix me, Livia. I'm just asking you to live, to have the life my sister never got. He stood. The pressure is on me to make sure you can. He left her alone in the music room with the silent piano and the weight of understanding. Valerio Russo was broken in ways that couldn't be fixed, carrying guilt that couldn't be absolved. But he was trying to build something good from the wreckage, and somehow Livia had become part of that attempt. She went to bed that night thinking about university applications and piano lessons and the strange feeling of being cared for by someone who expected nothing in return. It was foreign and frightening and wonderful all at once. The next morning, Livia woke with purpose. She found Marco after breakfast and asked him to drive her back to the city. At the university, she picked up application materials and sat in the admissions office, filling out forms with hands that only shook a little. What program? The admissions counselor asked. Literature and creative writing. The woman smiled. We have an excellent program. Challenging, but rewarding. She reviewed Livia's high school transcripts, which Marco had somehow procured overnight. Your grades are strong. I think you'd do well here. Well, even though I've been out of school for a year? Some of our best students take time off before university. Life experience makes the literature more meaningful. The counselor stamped several forms. You'll need letters of recommendation and a writing sample. Can you provide those within 2 weeks? Livia thought about the notebooks her mother had destroyed, the stories she'd stopped writing. Yes, I can do that. Back at the villa, she found Valerio in the library, reading through financial reports. She told him about the application, the requirements, her mixture of excitement and terror. I'll need recommendations, she said, but I don't have anyone who could write them. My teachers from high school barely knew me, and I haven't exactly been building professional relationships. Valerio considered this. I know people at the university. I could make calls. No. The word came out firmer than she intended. I appreciate it, but if I do this, I need to do it on my own merit, not because of who I'm married to. He smiled slightly. Fair enough. What about the writing sample? That I can do? I just need to actually write something. Then write. He gestured to the desk in the corner. Everything you need is here. Take your time. Livia spent the next week writing. She woke early and worked until lunch, then revised in the afternoons. The story poured out of her, a girl trapped in a small town, dreaming of escape, finding freedom in unexpected places. It wasn't subtle, but it was honest. Valerio read the final draft at her request, his expression unreadable as he turned pages. When he finished, he set the papers down carefully. This is good, Livia. Really good. You're just saying that. I don't just say things. He met her eyes. You have talent. Raw, yes. Needs development, certainly. But the bones are there. The truth. He paused. Submit this. And if they're smart, they'll accept you. The confidence in his voice made her believe it might actually be possible. The recommendations proved easier than expected. Father Antonio, despite his fear of Valerio, agreed to write one focusing on Livia's character and resilience. Teresa the seamstress wrote another, speaking to Livia's intelligence and adaptability. It wasn't traditional, but it was genuine. Livia submitted her application on a Thursday afternoon, Marco driving her to the university to hand-deliver the materials. As she walked out of the admissions office, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. That evening, she found Valerio in the garden, walking among the olive trees as the sun set. He looked different here, away from his desk and his business. More human, less dangerous. "I submitted it," she told him. "How do you feel?" "Terrified. What if they reject me? What if I'm not good enough?" "Then you apply again, or you find another path. But you don't give up because of fear." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "You've survived worse than rejection, Livia. You can survive this too." They stood together in the fading light, and Livia realized something had changed. When she looked at Valerio now, she didn't see the monster from her mother's warnings, or even the grief-stricken man trying to save his sister through strangers. She saw someone who'd kept every promise he'd made, who'd given her space when she needed it and support when she asked, who'd protected her from her mother's manipulation and encouraged her dreams without demanding anything in return. She saw someone she was starting to trust. "Why did you really choose me?" she asked quietly. "Out of all the people you could have helped, why was it me?" Valerio was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "Because I saw you once. 2 years ago, before my people ever made contact with your mother. You were working at the cafe, and a customer was harassing you, touching you when you clearly didn't want to be touched. You asked him to stop, so politely, so carefully. And when he didn't, you just endured it, because that's what you'd learned to do." Livia remembered that day. The man's hand on her waist, his breath in her ear, her frozen smile. "I watched you accept something you shouldn't have had to accept," Valerio continued, "and I saw Julia. Saw her enduring our father's rages because she had no power to stop them. And I thought, not again. I can't watch another girl just endure when I have the power to change it. So you investigated me. So I learned everything I could about your situation. And when I discovered your mother's debts and her willingness to sell you to settle them, I made sure I was the one who bought." He looked at her directly. "Not because I wanted a wife, but because I wanted you to have the choice Julia never got." The confession hung between them, honest and painful. Livia understood now why he'd done this, why he'd structured everything so carefully. It wasn't about her, not really. It was about a 17-year-old girl who'd died in her brother's arms, and the man who'd spent years trying to forgive himself for not saving her. "I'm not your sister," Livia said gently. "I know. And you're not responsible for fixing what my mother broke. I know that too." He started walking again, and she fell into step beside him. "But I'm responsible for the promises I made you, and I intend to keep them." They walked in comfortable silence until the stars began appearing overhead. Somewhere in the house, Sophia was preparing dinner. In the distance, Marco was making his evening rounds. The villa hummed with its normal rhythms, and Livia realized she was starting to think of it as home. Not a prison, not a cage. Home. The thought should have terrified her. She'd been here less than 2 weeks. But somehow, in this strange house with this complicated man, she was beginning to feel safe. And safety, it turned out, was the foundation everything else could be built on. 3 weeks passed in a rhythm Livia had never known existed. Quiet mornings in the library, afternoons in the garden, evenings that sometimes included Valerio and sometimes didn't. He never demanded her time, never expected her presence. When they did share meals, the conversations grew easier, deeper. He told her about the legitimate businesses he ran alongside the illegal ones: vineyards, export companies, real estate. She told him about the books she was reading, the stories forming in her mind. It felt almost normal, almost like a life she could keep. Then the university letter arrived. Sophia brought it to the breakfast table where Livia sat alone, Valerio having left hours earlier for meetings in the city. The envelope was thick, official, embossed with the university seal. "This came for you," Sophia said, her smile knowing. "I think it's good news. Rejection letters are usually thin." Livia's hands shook as she opened it. Her eyes scanned the formal language once, twice, 3 times before the words actually registered. We are pleased to inform you of your acceptance into the literature and creative writing program. I got in, she whispered. Then louder, standing up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. I got in. Sophia pulled her into a fierce hug. Of course you did. I knew you would. Livia clutched the letter, reading it again to make sure she hadn't imagined it. Classes started in 2 weeks. Financial arrangements were outlined. She nearly laughed when she saw that tuition had already been paid in full by an anonymous benefactor. Valerio, obviously. He'd promised not to interfere with her application, but had said nothing about preventing money from being an obstacle. She should have been annoyed at his presumption. Instead, she felt grateful. Where is he? Livia asked. I need to tell him. He's meeting with associates until late afternoon, but he'll want to know. Why don't you call him? Livia had barely used the phone Valerio had given her except to contact Marco for rides. Calling him directly felt intimate somehow, like crossing an invisible boundary. But this was too important to wait. She dialed his number, which Marco had programmed as simply Valerio. He answered on the second ring, his voice distracted. Livia, is everything all right? I got in, she said, unable to keep the joy from her voice. The university accepted me. There was a pause, then she heard the smile in his response. Of course they did. I told you they would if they were smart. Classes start in 2 weeks. Then we'll make sure you have everything you need. His tone shifted, became more focused. This is good, Livia. This is exactly what should happen. Thank you for the tuition. I know it was you. Consider it an investment in the future of literature. She could hear voices in the background, someone calling his name. I have to go, but we'll celebrate tonight, properly. He ended the call before she could respond. Livia stood holding the phone, the acceptance letter, feeling the weight of possibility settle over her shoulders. A month ago, she'd been trapped in her mother's apartment with no future beyond survival. Now she was enrolled in university, living in a villa, married to a man who celebrated her victories without claiming credit for them. The transformation felt too fast, too complete, like she was living someone else's life. That afternoon, Livia walked through the gardens, trying to ground herself in the reality of what was happening. The olive trees were heavy with fruit, almost ready for harvest. Workers moved through the vineyard rows in the distance, tending to the vines that produced the wine Valerio's legitimate business sold throughout the region. She found herself at the edge of the property, where a low stone wall overlooked the valley below. The view was spectacular, rolling hills, distant towns, the world spreading out in all directions. Freedom made visible. It's beautiful, isn't it? Livia turned to find Marco approaching, his usual careful distance maintained. I didn't hear you. I've been told I move quietly. Useful skill in my line of work. He leaned against the wall beside her, not quite close enough to crowd. Sophia told me about the university. Congratulations. Thank you. Livia hesitated, then asked the question that had been building. Does it bother you, the way Valerio runs his life? The illegal parts alongside the legitimate ones. Marco considered this carefully. I've worked for Mr. Russo for 8 years. I've seen him make hard choices, do questionable things, but I've also seen him operate with a code most criminals abandon the moment it becomes inconvenient. He paused. He doesn't hurt innocents, doesn't tolerate human trafficking or exploitation, refuses deals that would harm children. In this world, that makes him almost moral. Almost moral is still immoral. Yes, but it's better than the alternative. Marco met her eyes. The men he destroyed to build his empire? They were worse, much worse. Sometimes the only way to stop monsters is to become something monstrous yourself. Is that what he is? Monstrous? He's complicated, capable of great kindness and terrible violence, depending on what the situation requires. Marco's expression softened. But with you, Mrs. Russo, he's only ever been kind, and I think that's the version of himself he wishes he could be all the time. The insight stayed with Livia as she walked back to the villa. Valerio wasn't good or evil. He existed in the gray spaces between doing bad things for what he believed were better reasons. It didn't excuse the darkness, but it explained the light. Dinner that night was different. Valerio had arranged for the meal to be served in the garden, under strings of lights that turned the olive trees into something magical. Wine from his own vineyard, food prepared with obvious care, music playing softly from hidden speakers. This is too much, Livia said as he pulled out her chair. It's a celebration. Celebrations are supposed to be too much. He poured wine for them both, then raised his glass. To Livia Russo, university student, may you write stories that change the world. They touched glasses, and Livia felt emotion tighten her throat. I don't know how to thank you for all of this. Then don't. Just succeed. That's thanks enough. They ate slowly, talking about her classes, the professors whose names appeared in her acceptance packet, the book she should read before the semester started. Valerio knew the literature program surprisingly well. He'd apparently made donations to the university over the years and had taken an interest in their curriculum. You could have gone to university yourself, Livia observed. You're clearly educated. I had tutors growing up. My father insisted on it despite his other failings. Valerio's expression went distant. He wanted us to be cultured, sophisticated, said criminals who couldn't quote Dante were just thugs. What happened to him? Your father? The question hung in the air. Valerio set down his fork, his movements very precise. He died 5 years ago. Sophia said he's no longer a problem. Sophia talks too much. But there was no anger in his voice, just resignation. Yes, I killed him. After Julia died, I made sure he could never hurt anyone else. It wasn't justice. Justice would have required a trial, evidence, due process. It was vengeance, pure and simple. Livia should have been horrified, should have recoiled from this admission of murder. Instead, she felt only a strange understanding. Do you regret it? I regret that it was necessary. I regret that I didn't act sooner before Julia paid the price for my hesitation. He met her eyes. But I don't regret stopping him. Some people forfeit their right to live when they prove they'll only use that life to cause suffering. That's a dangerous philosophy. Yes, which is why I'm very careful about who I apply it to. He picked up his wine again. I'm not a good man, Livia. I don't pretend to be. But I try to direct my violence toward people who deserve it. And the people who work for you, Marco, Sophia, all the others, do they know what you've done? They know exactly what I am. And they choose to stay anyway, either because they believe in the code I follow, or because the alternative employers in this business are worse. He paused. You're free to judge me, free to be disgusted. The contract gives you the right to leave if you can't reconcile what I am with what you need me to be. Livia thought about this, about the man sitting across from her who'd killed his own father but had given her freedom, who ran criminal enterprises but protected the vulnerable, who carried guilt like a physical weight but kept trying to do better. I'm not disgusted, she said quietly. I'm just trying to understand. Understanding me might be a mistake. It's easier to keep your distance if you see me as simply dangerous. Maybe I don't want to keep my distance anymore. The admission surprised them both. Valerio's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across his features before he controlled it. Livia, I'm not saying I trust you completely. I'm not saying I understand everything about your world. She leaned forward. But I'm saying I see who you've been with me these past weeks, and that person has never been anything but honest and kind. That person is still capable of terrible things. I know. But terrible things done to terrible people feel different than random cruelty. She paused. My mother used to hit me because I existed, because I reminded her of everything she'd lost. That was senseless violence. What you did to your father, that was stopping someone who would have kept hurting people. They're not the same. Valerio was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the soft light. You're very young to have such a nuanced view of morality. I'm 19 and I've survived an abusive mother and an arranged marriage to a mafia boss. I've had to develop nuance just to make sense of my life. He smiled at that, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face. Fair point. He raised his glass again. To nuance, then, and to not having to be simply good or simply evil. To complicated people doing their best, Livia added. They drank to that, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics, books they'd both read, places Livia wanted to visit now that she had the means, Valerio's plans to expand the vineyard. It felt easy, natural, like they'd known each other far longer than a month. As the evening wound down, Valerio walked her back into the villa. They paused outside her bedroom door, and Livia realized she didn't want the night to end. Can I ask you something? She said. Always. Why haven't you tried to touch me? In all these weeks, you've never even tried to kiss me. Most men in your position would have considered it their right. Valerio's expression grew serious. Because it's not my right. Because consent given under duress isn't consent at all. And because, he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully, if something ever happens between us, I want it to be because you chose it freely, not because you felt obligated or afraid or grateful. And if I never choose it, then we remain exactly as we are. Housemates with a legal agreement. I can live with that, Livia. I've lived with far worse. She studied his face, this man who'd given her everything and asked for nothing. What if I told you I was starting to choose it? His breath caught. Are you? I don't know yet, but I'm not afraid of you anymore. That feels like progress. It is progress. He took a small step back, maintaining the distance he'd always kept. Take your time. Figure out what you want without any pressure from me. The contract stands regardless. He left her at her door, and Livia entered her room feeling off balance in a way she couldn't quite name. The dynamic between them was shifting, evolving from stranger and rescuer into something more complex. She wasn't sure what it would become, but she found herself curious rather than frightened. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Teresa delivered an entire wardrobe of clothes suitable for university, casual but well-made, the kind of outfits that said the wearer belonged in academic spaces. Marco drove Livia to the city to buy textbooks and supplies, helping her carry everything back to the villa. Valerio was often absent, his business requiring attention elsewhere. But he left notes. A book he thought she'd enjoy, a newspaper article about the literature program, a reminder that she could call him any time if she needed anything. The small gestures added up to a portrait of someone who cared without demanding acknowledgement for that care. The night before classes started, Livia couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, anxiety and excitement warring in her chest. Finally, she gave up and went to the library, thinking a book might calm her mind. She found Valerio there, sitting in one of the leather chairs with a glass of wine and a file of papers. He looked up when she entered, his tie loosened, exhaustion visible in the lines around his eyes. Couldn't sleep? He asked. Too nervous. She curled up in the chair across from him. What are you doing up? Work. Always work. He set the file aside. Tomorrow's a big day for you. I keep thinking I'll show up and they'll realize they made a mistake, that I don't actually belong there. Imposter syndrome. Most intelligent people experience it. He sipped his wine. But you do belong there, Livia. Your writing sample was excellent. Your transcript's strong. You earned this admission. With help. Everyone succeeds with help. The myth of the self-made person is exactly that, a myth. He gestured to the library around them. I built my businesses with help from people who believed in me, who gave me opportunities. Taking help isn't weakness. It's wisdom. Livia pulled her knees to her chest. What if I fail? Then you learn from it and try again. Failure isn't fatal unless you let it be. He paused. Do you want to know what I think will actually happen? What? I think you'll walk into that classroom tomorrow, nervous but determined. I think you'll discover you're exactly as smart as your classmates, maybe smarter in some ways because you've lived more than most 19-year-olds. And I think 6 months from now, you'll wonder why you were ever afraid. His confidence felt like a tangible thing, solid enough to lean on. You have a lot of faith in someone you barely know. I know you better than you think. I know you survived years of abuse and came out still capable of kindness. I know you had the courage to sign that contract even though you had no reason to trust me. I know you submitted that university application despite being terrified of rejection. He met her eyes. Those things tell me everything I need to know about who you are. They sat together in comfortable silence, the library quiet around them. Eventually, Valerio stood and poured a second glass of wine, offering it to her. To tomorrow, he said, and to the beginning of the life you were always meant to have. Livia took the glass and stood, touching it to his. What life were you meant to have? The question seemed to catch him off guard. He considered it seriously, looking past her to some distant point. I don't know anymore. Maybe this one. Maybe trying to build something good from the wreckage is exactly what I'm supposed to do. Does it feel like enough? Some days. He finished his wine. Other days, I wonder if I'm just fooling myself, pretending that a few good deeds can balance the scales. I don't think the scales ever balance, Livia said quietly. I think we just do the best we can with what we have and hope it matters. Wise words for someone so young. Trauma ages you fast. He smiled sadly at that. Yes, it does. He collected his papers, preparing to leave. Get some sleep, Livia. Tomorrow starts your future. She watched him go, then returned to her room. But she didn't sleep immediately. Instead, she pulled out the legal document she'd kept locked in her desk drawer for the past month and read through it again. The promises were still there, still legally binding. She could leave tomorrow if she wanted, could take the trust fund and the settlement and start over completely independent, but she didn't want to. Somewhere in the past weeks, this strange arranged marriage had become something she chose, not because of gratitude or obligation, but because the life here, the books and the garden and the quiet dinners with a man who saw her as worth protecting, felt more real than anything she'd known before. Livia locked the document away again and finally slept. Her last thought before dreams took her being that maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The alarm woke her at 6. Marco drove her to campus, helping carry her bag of textbooks to the literature building. He waited while she found her first classroom, making sure she knew how to get home if she needed to leave early. You'll do great, Mrs. Russo, he said before heading back to the car. The classroom filled slowly with other students, some her age, some older, all of them carrying the same nervous energy. The professor arrived exactly on time, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an easy smile. Welcome to Introduction to Literary Analysis, she began. This class will challenge everything you think you know about reading. We'll tear apart texts you thought you understood and rebuild them into something new. Some of you will love it, some will hate it. All of you will grow. Livia pulled out her notebook and began to write, her nervousness fading into focus. The professor was right. This was challenging, demanding, exactly what she needed. For 2 hours, she lost herself in discussions of narrative structure and character development, contributing observations that the professor noted with approval. When the class ended, a girl about Livia's age approached her. That point you made about unreliable narrators? Brilliant. I'm Carmen. Livia. First semester? Yes. You? Third year, but I'm retaking this class for better understanding. But Carmen grinned. Want to grab coffee? There's a cafe on campus that's actually decent. Livia hesitated, thinking of Marco waiting. But this was part of the experience, wasn't it? Making friends, building a life beyond the villa's walls. She sent Marco a text, something Valerio had insisted she learn how to do, letting him know she'd be a while longer. The cafe was crowded with students, loud with conversation and laughter. Carmen bought them both coffee and settled into a corner table, immediately launching into questions about Livia's background, her interests, why she'd chosen literature. Livia found herself editing the truth carefully. She was married, that much was obvious from the ring on her finger, but she skipped over the details of how and why. Said her husband supported her education, which was true. Said they lived outside the city, also true. Carmen seemed satisfied with the broad strokes, more interested in discussing favorite books than personal histories. You have to meet my study group, Carmen said as they left the cafe 2 hours later. We meet Tuesday nights at the library. You'd fit right in, Livia agreed, feeling something unfamiliar blooming in her chest. Belonging. She was making friends, building connections separate from Valerio and the villa. This was what normal looked like. Marco was waiting in the parking area, and if he was annoyed by the delay, he didn't show it. The drive home gave Livia time to process the day. The challenging class, the new friend, the realization that she could actually do this. She found Valerio in his office reviewing contracts. He looked up when she knocked, his expression immediately attentive. How was it? He asked. Terrifying and wonderful and exactly what I needed. The words poured out, descriptions of the class, the professor's insights, Carmen's invitation to join her study group. Valerio listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he was actually hearing her, not just waiting for her to finish. I'm proud of you, he said when she finally paused for breath. The simple statement hit harder than she expected. Thank you for making this possible. You made it possible. I just removed obstacles. He set aside his work completely, giving her his full attention. You're building something, Livia. A life that's entirely yours. That's exactly what should happen. They had dinner together that night, and Livia talked more than she ever had before, her excitement making her bold. Valerio seemed content to listen, offering observations but mostly just letting her process the day aloud. As she prepared for bed that night, Livia realized something had shifted. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was actually living, going to university, making friends, exploring interests she'd thought were lost forever. And all of it was possible because a dangerous man had decided one girl's freedom mattered more than his reputation. The next weeks fell into a pattern. Classes 3 days a week, study sessions with Carmen's group on Tuesdays, quiet evenings at the villa reading or talking with Valerio when he was home. The marriage that had started as a legal arrangement became something more like partnership. Two people sharing space and occasionally time, each supporting the other's separate life. Livia wrote papers that her professors praised, contributed to class discussions with growing confidence, and slowly stopped waiting for someone to tell her she didn't belong. The imposter syndrome faded, replaced by the steady knowledge that she'd earned her place. Then, 6 weeks into the semester, everything changed. Livia was walking to her car after class when she noticed a man watching her from across the parking lot. Something about his posture, the way he tracked her movement, sent warning bells through her nervous system. She walked faster, pulling out her phone to call Marco. The man intercepted her before she could dial. "Livia Russo?" he said, his smile cold. "We need to talk about your husband." Livia's finger hovered over Marco's number, but the man was already too close. He held up both hands in a gesture meant to be placating, but his eyes remained calculating, cold. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, "just to deliver a message." "I don't want your message. Leave me alone." Livia tried to step around him, but he shifted, blocking her path without actually touching her. "Your husband has something that belongs to my employer. We'd like it back." "I don't know anything about Valerio's business." "Don't you?" The man's smile widened. "You live in his house, sleep under his roof, wear his ring. That makes you part of his world whether you like it or not." Fear spiked through Livia's chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. Marco had taught her what to do if anyone ever approached her. Stay in public, stay visible, don't go anywhere alone with them. The parking lot was full of students. She wasn't isolated. "Tell your employer to take it up with Valerio directly. I'm not involved." "See, that's where you're wrong." The man took a half step closer, and Livia caught the scent of cigarettes and expensive cologne. "You became involved the moment you married him. That makes you leverage." The word landed like a physical blow. Leverage. She wasn't a person to these people. She was a tool to manipulate Valerio. "Mrs. Russo?" Marco's voice cut through the tension like a knife. He appeared from behind a row of cars, moving with deceptive casualness, but Livia could see the coiled readiness in his posture. "Is this man bothering you?" The stranger's expression flickered. Annoyance, then calculation, then careful neutrality. "Just having a friendly conversation." "Didn't look friendly." Marco positioned himself between Livia and the man, his hand resting casually near his jacket, where Livia knew he kept a weapon. "I think you should leave now." "This isn't over," the man said, his eyes still on Livia. "Tell Russo that Dante sends his regards, and his deadline." He walked away without hurrying, confident in a way that made Livia's skin crawl. Marco waited until he was out of sight before turning to her, his expression grim. "Are you hurt? Did he touch you?" "No, he just talked." Livia's hands were shaking. "He said I'm leverage, that I'm part of Valerio's world now." Marco's jaw tightened. "Get in the car, mister." Russo needs to know about this immediately. The drive back to the villa was silent, Marco's hands tight on the wheel, his usual calm replaced by visible tension. Livia stared out the window, replaying the encounter, the stranger's words echoing in her mind. She'd known intellectually that Valerio's world was dangerous, but she'd felt insulated from it by the villa's walls and Marco's protection. Now that illusion had shattered. They found Valerio in his office with 3 other men Livia didn't recognize. He took one look at her face and immediately dismissed them, his expression hardening as Marco explained what had happened. "Dante," Valerio's voice was ice, I should have known he'd try something like this. Who is he? Livia asked, finding her voice. A competitor. Someone who thinks he can expand his territory by pushing me out. Valerio moved to pour himself a drink, his movements controlled but radiating fury. I've been blocking a shipment route he wants access to. Apparently he's decided to make it personal. By threatening me. By using you to pressure me. He downed the drink in one swallow. I'm sorry, Livia. I thought I'd kept you separate enough from my business that this wouldn't happen. But it did happen, and he called me leverage. The word still tasted bitter. Is that what I am to you? A tool someone can use against you? Valerio's eyes snapped to hers, something raw and pained in them. No, absolutely not. He stopped, seemed to recalibrate. The contract still stands. If you want to leave because of this, I'll arrange protection until Dante's dealt with, but I won't force you to stay somewhere you feel unsafe. There it was again. The choice. Always the choice, even now. Livia thought about the classroom she'd left an hour ago. Carmen's study group she was supposed to attend tomorrow. The life she'd been building piece by careful piece. If I leave, he wins. He gets to use me to control you. If you stay, you're at risk. I've been at risk my whole life. She met his eyes steadily. At least here I have protection, and a purpose beyond just surviving. Marco cleared his throat. Sir, we should increase security. Add another driver for Mrs. Russo. Maybe someone on campus during her classes. Do it. And I want someone watching Dante's people 24 hours a day. If they so much as look in Livia's direction again. Understood. After Marco left, Valerio sank into his desk chair, suddenly looking exhausted. This is exactly what I tried to prevent. You were supposed to be safe here. I am safe. One man approached me in a public parking lot and made vague threats. That's not the same as being in actual danger. Livia moved closer. What does he want, really? Control of shipping routes through the eastern ports. It's worth millions. And I've been blocking his access for 2 years because his primary cargo is, he paused, things I don't allow in my territory. Things like what? His expression went dark. Human trafficking, forced labor. Dante makes his money off people who can't protect themselves, and I won't give him easier access to expand that operation. The moral complexity of it struck Livia again, a criminal refusing to help another criminal because some crimes were too unconscionable even for him. So you're the lesser evil. I'm still evil, Livia. Don't romanticize what I do. I'm not. I'm just trying to understand where the lines are. She sat in the chair across from him. What happens now? Now I make it very clear to Dante that you're untouchable, that approaching you again will have consequences he won't survive. Valerio's tone was matter-of-fact, discussing violence the way someone else might discuss a business negotiation. And I increase security around you until he gets the message. Will he? Men like Dante understand one language. I'll speak it clearly enough that there's no confusion. The promise of violence hung in the air between them. Livia should have been horrified, should have recoiled from this reminder of what Valerio was capable of. Instead, she felt oddly protected. He would hurt people to keep her safe, and that fact should have terrified her, but somehow didn't. I should tell you something, she said quietly. I'm not afraid of you anymore. I haven't been for weeks. That might be a mistake. Maybe, but I trust you to keep your promises, and you promised I'd be safe here. She paused. I believe you. Something shifted in Valerio's expression, walls coming down for just a moment. I don't deserve that trust. Probably not, but you have it anyway. They looked at each other across the desk, and Livia felt the dynamic between them crystallizing into something new. Not rescuer and victim, not even just partners in a legal arrangement. Something more complicated and honest. Two damaged people who'd found unexpected safety with each other. Stay away from campus for a few days, Valerio said finally. Let me handle Dante. Once he understands the situation, we can reassess. I have classes, papers due. I'll have someone collect your assignments. You can work from here. When she started to protest, he held up a hand. Please, Livia, just a few days, let me fix this. The vulnerability in the request made her agree. Fine, but I'm not hiding forever. I wouldn't ask you to. That night, Livia couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the encounter, the stranger's cold smile, the casual way he'd threatened her. Finally, around midnight, she gave up and went to the library, seeking comfort in familiar surroundings. She found Valerio there again, but this time he wasn't working. He stood at the window overlooking the gardens, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his posture radiating tension. "Can't sleep either?" Livia asked softly. He turned, unsurprised by her presence. "Too much to think about. Like how to make Dante back off. Like how I put you in danger by being selfish." He took a drink. "I should have left you alone, Livia. Paid your mother's debts from a distance. Set up the trust fund anonymously. Instead, I married you and painted a target on your back. You gave me a choice. A choice within parameters I created. That's not the same as real freedom." Livia moved closer, studying his profile in the dim light. "Do you regret it? Marrying me? I regret that my world touched yours. But no, I don't regret knowing you." He looked at her directly. "These past months, watching you come alive, pursue your education, become who you were always meant to be, that's been the best thing I've done in years. Maybe the only purely good thing. It hasn't been purely good. You're still a criminal. I'm still complicit by association. Yes, but you're also free in ways you weren't before. That has to count for something." They stood together in the quiet library, and Livia made a decision. She crossed the remaining distance between them and took the whiskey glass from his hand, setting it aside. Then, before she could overthink it, she reached up and kissed him. Valerio froze for a heartbeat. Then his hands came up to gently grip her shoulders, holding her steady, but not pulling her closer. When she pulled back, his eyes were dark with emotion. "Livia, I'm choosing this," she said firmly. "Not because I'm grateful or obligated or afraid. Because I want to. You're reacting to the stress of today. The threat from Dante made me realize life's too short to keep pretending I don't feel something for you." She stepped closer again. "I see you, Valerio. Not the monster everyone else fears. The man who reads poetry and protects people who can't protect themselves and tries so hard to be better than his circumstances required. That man is still capable of terrible things. I know. I'm choosing him anyway." He studied her face, searching for doubt or hesitation. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him because he pulled her close and kissed her properly, thoroughly, like he'd been holding back for months and finally had permission to stop. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Valerio rested his forehead against hers. "This changes things." "Good. Things needed changing." He laughed quietly, the sound rare and genuine. "You're braver than I am." "No, I'm just tired of being afraid of the wrong things." Livia pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "Dante's threat made me realize I've been so worried about trusting you that I missed the fact I already do. Completely. Even knowing what I've done? What I'm capable of? Even knowing. Maybe especially knowing because you've never lied to me about who you are." She paused. "Can I stay with you tonight? Not," she clarified quickly, "not for anything except not being alone." Valerio's expression softened. "Of course." They ended up on the library couch, Livia tucked against his side, his arm around her shoulders. It felt natural, safe, like something they'd done 1,000 times before. They didn't talk much, just existed together in the quiet, both processing the shift in their relationship. Eventually, Livia fell asleep to the steady rhythm of Valerio's breathing and the warmth of being held by someone who'd proven, again and again, that her safety mattered more than his convenience. The next 3 days were tense. Livia worked on assignments from the villa while Marco coordinated increased security and Valerio disappeared for long stretches to deal with Dante. She didn't ask for details, didn't want to know exactly what methods he was using to send his message. But she saw the results in his face when he returned each night, the weight of necessary violence evident in the lines around his eyes. On the 4th day, he came to find her in the garden where she was reading. "It's handled," he said without preamble. "Dante won't approach you again." "How can you be sure?" "Because I made the alternative very clear, and because his second-in-command decided now was an excellent time to renegotiate their partnership." Valerio's smile was cold. "Dante's organization is restructuring under new management that understands the rules." Livia closed her book. "Did you kill him?" No, but I destroyed his credibility and his power base. He's no longer in a position to threaten anyone. He sat beside her on the bench. You can go back to campus tomorrow if you want. Just like that? Just like that. He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. I told you I'd fix it. By destroying a man's entire operation. He threatened you. What did he expect would happen? The matter-of-fact tone suggested this was obvious, reasonable, the natural consequence of crossing a line. Livia should have been disturbed by how easily Valerio discussed dismantling someone's life. Instead, she felt the same strange protection she'd experienced before. He would move mountains to keep her safe, and that fierce protectiveness was something she'd never experienced from anyone. Thank you, she said quietly. For committing crimes on your behalf? For keeping your promise. You said I'd be safe here. You made sure I was. They sat together in the garden, the afternoon sun warm on their faces, and Livia realized something had fundamentally changed. The marriage that started as a rescue had evolved into something real, a partnership built on honesty and choice, and the complicated understanding that sometimes good people do questionable things for the right reasons. That evening, Valerio asked her to have dinner with him in the formal dining room, rather than the garden or casual breakfast room. When Livia arrived, she found candles and flowers and the kind of careful attention to detail that suggested this meal mattered. What's the occasion? She asked. A celebration. You survived your first threat from my world and chose to stay anyway. That deserves recognition. He pulled out her chair. Also, I want to ask you something. They ate the first course in comfortable conversation, discussing her classes and the study session she'd missed, and Carmen's texts asking if she was okay. Finally, as dessert was served, Valerio set down his fork and met her eyes directly. The contract I gave you on our wedding day, do you still have it? Yes, locked in my desk drawer. Have you read it recently? Not since the first week. He pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket. This is a new contract. I'd like you to read it. Livia took the papers, confused. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was clear. This new contract dissolved the old one. It removed all the escape clauses and settlements, erased the guarantee that she could leave any time without consequences. Her hands tightened on the paper. I don't understand. You're taking away my freedom? No, I'm offering you a different kind of choice. Valerio's voice was steady but intense. The first contract was about giving you an exit. This one is about giving us a beginning. If you sign it, you're choosing to stay. Not because you're trapped or obligated, but because you actively want to build a life with me. And if I don't sign it, then the original contract stands. You keep all the protections, all the guarantees. Nothing changes except you'll know I was willing to offer you something real. He paused. I'm not asking you to give up your freedom, Livia. I'm asking you to freely choose me the same way I've chosen you every day since we met. Livia read through the new contract again, seeing what he was offering. A real marriage, not a legal arrangement, a partnership without escape clauses because it was built on wanting to stay, not planning to leave. This is terrifying, she admitted. Yes. What if it doesn't work? What if we're too different? Then we figure it out together. Or we don't, and we separate like any normal couple who realizes they're not compatible. He met her eyes. But at least it would be real, Livia, not a rescue or an arrangement, just two people choosing each other. She thought about the past months, the books and the garden and the quiet evenings. She thought about the way Valerio had protected her from Dante, had supported her education, had given her space to figure out who she wanted to be. She thought about his honesty, his complexity, the way he carried guilt like a physical weight but kept trying to be better. And she thought about the kiss in the library, the feeling of being held while she slept, the steady knowledge that this man would move heaven and earth to keep her safe. Do you have a pen? She asked. Valerio's expression shifted. Hope mixed with something deeper. He produced a pen from his jacket, and Livia spread the new contract on the table beside her dessert plate. She signed her name clearly, decisively, without hesitation. When she looked up, Valerio was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. You're sure? I've been sure for weeks. I just needed to admit it. She handed him the signed contract. I'm choosing you, Valerio Russo. All of you. The good parts and the complicated parts and even the dangerous parts. I'm choosing this life we're building. He stood and pulled her up with him, kissing her with a passion that had been held back for too long. When they finally broke apart, he kept her close, his hands framing her face. I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of that choice, he said quietly. You already are. That night, Livia didn't return to the blue room. She stayed with Valerio in his quarters, larger and less isolated than her space. And they talked until dawn about everything and nothing. About her classes and his business, about books they'd read and places they wanted to visit, about the strange path that had brought them together. When Livia finally fell asleep, it was with Valerio's arm around her and the steady knowledge that she'd made the right choice. Not the safe choice or the easy one, but the one that felt most true. She'd married a stranger to escape her mother. She was choosing to stay married to a man she'd come to know, respect, and though it still felt new and fragile to name it, love. The weeks that followed had their own rhythm. Livia returned to campus with increased but subtle security. Marco nearby but not obvious, another driver on standby. Her professors welcomed her back. Carmen hugged her and demanded to know everything, and slowly the disruption of Dante's threat faded into just another thing that had happened and been handled. The semester progressed. Livia wrote papers that challenged her, made friends who knew her as a student first and Valerio's wife second, built a life that felt authentically hers. And every evening she came home to the villa where Valerio waited, sometimes with work still demanding attention, sometimes with dinner already planned, always with the careful attention to her needs that had characterized their relationship from the start. They learned each other slowly. Livia discovered Valerio was an early riser who read the newspaper with his coffee, that he played piano when he was stressed, that he had a dry sense of humor most people never saw. Valerio learned that Livia was fiercely independent about her schoolwork, but appreciated help with everything else, that she loved thunderstorms and hated being cold, that she needed quiet time alone to process her thoughts. The complicated parts of his business didn't disappear. There were still late-night meetings and trips to the city and conversations Livia wasn't part of. But Valerio was careful to keep the darkness separate from their home life, to make the villa a place where they could be just Livia and Valerio, rather than the crime boss and his rescued bride. 3 months after signing the new contract, Livia came home to find the villa transformed. Flowers everywhere, candles lit throughout the main rooms, music playing softly. What's all this? She asked Sophia, who was directing staff with obvious pleasure. Mr. Russo's orders. He said tonight was special. Sophia's smile was knowing. He's waiting for you in the garden. Livia found him under the olive trees, the same spot where they'd had their celebration dinner months ago. But this time, the setting was even more elaborate. A table for two set with their finest dishes, wine from the vineyard's best vintage, the sky painted in sunset colors. We're celebrating again? Livia asked as he pulled out her chair. We are. Sit. She obeyed, intrigued. Valerio poured wine for them both, then raised his glass. To 6 months, he said, since the day I married a stranger who became the most important person in my life. They touched glasses, and Livia felt emotion tighten her throat. You're very sentimental for a crime boss. I'm sentimental about very specific things, you being one of them. He set down his glass. I have something for you. He produced a small box and Livia's heart jumped. When he opened it, she found not a ring but a key, old brass worn with age. This is the key to the music room piano, Valerio explained. It was Julia's. She was the only one who ever locked it, to keep our father out when she needed a safe space. His voice went soft. I've kept it locked since she died, unable to play without remembering. But I think it's time to fill that room with music again. Valerio, I'm not giving this to you as a replacement for her. I'm giving it to you because you've taught me that building something new doesn't dishonor what we've lost. He placed the key in her palm. Learn to play if you want, or keep it locked if you prefer, but either way, it's yours now. The room, the piano, the memories, all of it. Livia closed her fingers around the key, understanding the weight of what he was offering. This wasn't just access to a room. It was him choosing to move forward, to let new memories coexist with the painful ones. I'll learn, she said quietly, and I'll play for you. His smile transformed his face. I'd like that. They ate slowly, talking about everything and nothing, comfortable in the life they'd built together. As dessert was served, Valerio reached across the table and took her hand. I need to tell you something, he said. I've been transitioning some of my business operations, moving away from the more questionable activities, focusing on the legitimate enterprises. Livia set down her fork. Why? Because I want to build something that can last, something I'm not ashamed of. He paused. And because you make me want to be better than I've been. Not perfect, I'll never be that, but better. That's a big change. It'll take years to fully accomplish, and there will always be parts of my past that can't be erased. But I'm trying, Livia. For you, but also for myself. His thumb traced circles on her palm. You showed me that it's possible to choose differently, to build something good from broken pieces. We're both building, she corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Yes, you could have. You're stronger than you know. He squeezed her hand. But I'm grateful you're choosing to build it with me anyway. They finished dinner as the stars emerged overhead, and Livia felt the last pieces of her old life finally releasing their hold. She wasn't the trapped girl from her mother's apartment anymore. She was Livia Russo, university student, aspiring writer, wife to a complicated man who'd given her the freedom to become whoever she wanted to be. The next morning, she took the brass key to the music room and unlocked the piano for the first time in years. The instrument was perfectly maintained despite its disuse, and when Livia pressed a key, the note rang clear and true. She didn't know how to play yet, but she would learn. She'd learn piano and finish her degree and write stories that mattered. She'd build a life that was entirely her own while sharing it with someone who'd proven over and over that her happiness was worth protecting. The marriage that began as a rescue had become something neither of them expected, a genuine partnership built on choice and honesty, and the understanding that sometimes the most unexpected paths lead exactly where you need to be. Livia sat at the piano bench, Julia's key in her pocket, and played a single note over and over, feeling it resonate through the room. This was freedom, not the absence of connection or obligation, but the presence of choice, the knowledge that she could leave but was choosing to stay, that she could build her own life and share it too. The sound of the piano brought Valerio to the doorway. He leaned against the frame, watching her with an expression that mixed grief and hope and something deeper, love perhaps, though they hadn't named it yet. Keep playing, he said quietly. Fill this room with new sounds. So she did, one note at a time, building something beautiful from the silence. Spring arrived 6 months after Livia first sat at Julia's piano, and with it came the annual town festival, the same celebration that had been happening every year since before Livia was born. She'd avoided thinking about her hometown since leaving it, had constructed her new life carefully around the absence of those memories. But the festival changed things. Carmen mentioned it during their study session one Tuesday evening, scrolling through social media on her phone. Oh, the Spring Festival in Monterosso starts this weekend. Have you ever been? It's supposed to be amazing. Food, music, the whole town celebrates. Livia's blood went cold. Monterosso. Her town. The place where everyone had watched her marry Valerio with pity in their eyes. I'm from there, she said quietly. Carmen looked up, surprised. Really? You never mentioned it. There wasn't much to mention. Small town, small life. Livia tried to keep her voice neutral. I haven't been back since I left. Don't you want to visit? See old friends? I didn't have friends there. Just people who felt sorry for me. Understanding dawned in Carmen's expression. Oh, was it that kind of small town? The worst kind. Everyone knows your business and no one actually helps. Livia closed her textbook. I have no desire to go back, but the conversation planted a seed that grew over the next few days. Livia found herself thinking about the town, about the people who'd watched her walk down that aisle expecting tragedy. About her mother, still living there, still drinking away the money from the debts Valerio had paid. She mentioned it to Valerio over dinner one evening, watching his reaction carefully. Would you want to go back? He asked. To the festival? I don't know. Part of me wants them to see that I'm okay, that their pity was wasted. She paused. Another part of me never wants to see that place again. We could go, Valerio said thoughtfully. Make an appearance. Let them see exactly how wrong their assumptions were. You do that? Go to a town festival just to prove a point? I do it to give you closure. The rest is just a bonus. He set down his fork. But Livia, You don't need to prove anything to those people. You don't owe them your success or your happiness. I know, but maybe I need to prove it to myself, that I've actually moved beyond that life. They discussed it over the next week, weighing the benefits against the potential discomfort. Finally, Livia made her decision. She would go to the festival, she would walk through her old town with her head high, and she would show everyone, including herself, how far she'd come. The festival began on Saturday. Valerio arranged for them to arrive in the late afternoon when the celebration would be in full swing. Marco drove them in a different car than usual. Still nice, but not ostentatious. Nothing that would draw unnecessary attention. As they entered the town, Livia felt her stomach tighten with anxiety. Everything looked exactly the same. The narrow streets, the old church, the central plaza where the festival was set up. It was like she'd never left, like the past 6 months had been a dream. "We can turn around," Valerio said quietly, his hand finding hers. "Say the word, and we leave." "No, I need to do this." They parked near the plaza and walked toward the festival together. Livia wore one of Teresa's creations, a simple but elegant dress that fit perfectly, paired with comfortable shoes and minimal jewelry. She looked like exactly what she was, a university student, well cared for, confident, not the frightened girl who'd been sold to settle debts. The moment they entered the plaza, conversation stopped. People stared, whispered, pointed. Livia felt the weight of their attention like a physical thing, but Valerio's steady presence beside her kept her grounded. "Livia?" Father Antonio approached cautiously, his expression a mixture of surprise and something that might have been relief. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Father," Livia managed to smile. "How have you been?" Well, and you?" His eyes darted to Valerio nervously. "You look healthy." "I am healthy, happy even." She squeezed Valerio's hand. "We both are." They made their way through the festival, stopping at various stalls, sampling food, pretending not to notice the constant stares and whispers. Livia saw people she'd known her entire life, shopkeepers who'd watched her grow up, teachers who'd taught her in school, neighbors who'd heard her mother's rages through thin walls and done nothing. Some approached to offer awkward congratulations. Others kept their distance, unsure how to reconcile the fearsome Valerio Russo with the man who was patiently trying to win his wife a stuffed animal at the ring toss. Then Livia saw her. Elena Moretti stood near the wine tent, a glass already in hand despite the early hour. She'd aged in the 6 months since their encounter in the city, her face more lined, her posture more defeated. When she spotted Livia, her expression cycled through surprise, calculation, and finally something that might have been shame. "We should go," Valerio said quietly, following Livia's gaze. "No." Livia straightened her spine. "I'm not running from her anymore." Elena approached slowly, and the crowd around them seemed to sense the tension, giving them space while obviously listening to every word. "Livia," Elena said, her voice rough. "You look well." "I am well. I heard you're going to university, studying literature." Elena took a drink. "Always did have your head in books." "Yes. It turns out having time to pursue my interests instead of working 3 jobs to pay your debts is good for my education." The crowd's whispers intensified. Elena's jaw tightened. "You don't need to be cruel." "I'm not being cruel. I'm being honest." Livia felt Valerio's hand on her lower back, supportive, but letting her handle this herself. "You sold me, Mother. Traded me to settle debts you created. That's not my cruelty. It's your truth. I saved you from poverty. You saved yourself. And you convinced yourself it was noble because I ended up somewhere better than your apartment." Livia's voice remained steady despite the emotion churning in her chest. "But you didn't save me." "He did." She gestured to Valerio, and Elena's eyes finally settled on him with something like fear. "You bought her," Elena said, her voice rising. "Everyone knows you paid off my debts and took my daughter like she was property." The accusation hung in the air. The entire plaza had gone silent, everyone watching to see how this would play out. Valerio stepped forward, his expression controlled, but his voice carrying clearly. "I paid your debts? Yes. That was our agreement. But I didn't buy your daughter." He pulled a folded document from his jacket, the original marriage contract, the one Livia had signed at the altar. "I gave her this. A legal guarantee of her freedom, the right to leave any time for any reason with no consequences. He handed it to Livia, who held it up so the crowd could see the official seals, the legal language, the signatures. I was never bought, Livia said clearly. I was given a choice, the first real choice I'd had in years. She looked at her mother directly. He gave me more freedom than you ever did. Elena's face flushed with anger and shame. You think you're better than me now? You think marrying money makes you special? I think building a life based on mutual respect instead of fear makes me healthier than I was. And I think you sold your daughter because it was easier than facing your own failures. Livia's voice softened slightly. I don't hate you, Mother, but I don't owe you anything either. Not my success, not my forgiveness, not my presence in your life. You ungrateful. Careful, Valerio said quietly, but the single word carried enough weight to stop Elena mid-sentence. You signed documents transferring all parental rights and obligations to me. That means Livia doesn't have to tolerate your abuse anymore, legally or otherwise. He pulled out another document, showing it to Elena and the gathered crowd. This is the agreement you signed, the one where you accepted payment for your debts in exchange for giving up all claims to your daughter. You made your choice. She made hers. And now you both have to live with the consequences. The crowd's murmurs grew louder. People who'd felt sorry for Livia 6 months ago were now seeing the full picture. Not a girl sold to a monster, but a woman who'd been given freedom and chosen to use it. Elena looked around at the faces of her neighbors, seeing their judgment, and something in her seemed to break. You'll regret this, she said to Livia, but the words lacked conviction. When he shows his true colors, you'll regret choosing him over your own mother. His true colors are the ones he showed me from the beginning. Honest, protective, giving me choices instead of ultimatums. Livia stepped closer to her mother, close enough to speak quietly but firmly. I hope you find peace someday. I hope you stop drinking and fix your life and become someone you can be proud of. But I'm not waiting for that to happen. I'm living my life without you in it. She turned and walked away, Valerio beside her, leaving Elena standing alone in the center of the plaza with everyone watching. The crowd parted for them, and Livia heard the whisper's changing tone. Less pity, more respect. More understanding that the story they'd assumed was tragedy had actually been rescue. They made it to the edge of the plaza before Livia's composure cracked. Valerio pulled her into a quiet corner between buildings and held her while she shook, adrenaline and emotion pouring out. You were amazing, he said quietly. So strong. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm going to be sick. That's normal. You just confronted your abuser in front of the entire town. You're allowed to feel whatever you're feeling. Livia pulled back, wiping her eyes. Did I do the right thing? Was I too harsh? You were honest. That's never wrong. He brushed a tear from her cheek. She tried to make you feel guilty for choosing yourself over her manipulation. You refused to accept that guilt. That's not harsh. It's healthy. They stood together in the narrow space, the sounds of the festival continuing in the background. Livia breathed deeply, grounding herself, feeling the weight of the confrontation settling into something more manageable. Can we go home now? She asked. Absolutely. Valerio kept his arm around her as they walked back to the car, and Livia noticed people watching with different expressions now. Not pity, not fear, something more like curiosity, perhaps even approval. Father Antonio caught up with them before they reached the car. Livia, wait, please. Wait. She stopped, tired but willing to hear him out. I owe you an apology, the priest said. I married you to Mr. Russo thinking I was witnessing a tragedy. I felt terrible about my role in it, but I see now that I didn't understand the situation at all. No one did, Livia said. Everyone assumed the worst because they didn't know Valerio, didn't know he was capable of giving instead of just taking. Father Antonio looked at Valerio directly. I judged you unfairly. I'm sorry for that. You judged based on my reputation. That's reasonable. Valerio's tone was measured. But perhaps next time, don't assume you know someone's story just because you know their name. The priest nodded, humbled. I'll remember that. And Livia, I'm glad you're happy. You deserve happiness. They parted on better terms, and as Marco drove them away from the town, Livia watched it disappear in the rearview mirror. She'd come back to prove something, and she had, not just to the town, but to herself. She was free, truly, completely free. Free from her mother's manipulation, free from the town's pity, free from the story everyone thought they knew. "Thank you for coming with me," she said to Valerio. "I couldn't have done that alone." "Yes, you could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to." He took her hand. "You faced your past with courage. That's worth celebrating." That night back at the villa, they had a quiet dinner in the garden. Just the two of them, the stars overhead, the peaceful sounds of the estate around them. Livia felt lighter than she had in months, like she'd shed a weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. "I've been thinking," she said as they finished their meal, "about the vineyard and the businesses you're transitioning. I want to help." Valerio raised an eyebrow. "Help how?" "You said you're building something legitimate, something that can last. I want to be part of that, not just as your wife, but as a partner." She leaned forward. "I'm studying literature and writing, but I could learn business too. Help with the vineyard's marketing, the export operations, whatever you need." "You want to work in the family business?" "I want to build something with you, something we can both be proud of." She paused. "Unless you think I can't, I think you can do anything you set your mind to." Valerio's expression was serious. "But I don't want you to feel obligated. Your education, your writing, those are yours. You don't need to give them up to help me." "I'm not giving them up. I'm expanding my interests." Livia smiled. "Besides, someone needs to make sure your business ventures don't all sound like criminal enterprises. You need better branding." He laughed, the sound genuine and free. "Better branding, right." "I'm serious. Russo Export sounds like a front for smuggling, but Villa Russo Wines and Estate Holdings sounds legitimate and appealing." "You've thought about this." "I've had time while you're in meetings, and I've been reading about business development in addition to my literature assignments." She reached across the table. "Let me help, Valerio. Let's build this together." He looked at their joined hands, then at her face, and she saw the moment he decided. "All right, we'll start small. You can help rebrand the vineyard and wine operations. If that goes well, we'll expand your role." "Deal." They shook on it like business partners. Then Valerio pulled her close and kissed her like they were much more than that. Which they were. Partners in business and life, lovers and friends. Two people who'd found each other through unlikely circumstances and chosen to build something real from the foundation of that strange beginning. The next months were busy. Livia balanced her university classes with learning about the vineyard operations, working with Valerio to restructure the business model and develop marketing strategies that would appeal to high-end restaurants and wine collectors. She discovered she had a knack for it. The same skills that made her good at analyzing literature helped her understand market positioning and brand storytelling. The vineyard thrived under their joint management. Orders increased, their reputation grew, and slowly the legitimate side of Valerio's operations began to outweigh the questionable ones. He kept his word about transitioning away from the darker aspects of his business, though Livia knew it was a gradual process that would take years to complete fully. Her second semester at university was even better than the first. She'd found her stride academically, her writing improving with each assignment. One of her professors encouraged her to submit a short story to a literary magazine, and to her shock, it was accepted for publication. The day the magazine arrived with her story printed in it, Livia ran through the villa looking for Valerio. She found him in his office, going through contracts. "Look!" She thrust the magazine at him, open to her story. "They published it. My story is actually published." He took the magazine carefully, reading the first few paragraphs, then looked up with pride evident in his expression. "This is incredible, Livia. Congratulations." "It's just a small magazine, not a big deal." "It's your first publication. It's a huge deal." He stood and pulled her into his arms. "I'm so proud of you." They celebrated that night with Sophia and Marco, opening the vineyard's best vintage and toasting to Livia's success. It felt surreal. 6 months ago, she'd been terrified of submitting her university application. Now she was a published writer, a business partner in a growing enterprise, and a wife in a marriage that had evolved into genuine love. She'd never said the words out loud, but they were there, growing stronger each day. She loved Valerio, his complexity, his honesty, the way he'd kept every promise and exceeded every expectation, the way he protected her without controlling her, supported her dreams without overshadowing them. That night, lying in bed together in the quarters they now shared, Livia finally said it. I love you. The words hung in the darkness. Valerio went very still beside her. You don't have to say it back, Livia continued quickly. I just wanted you to know, in case it wasn't obvious. It wasn't obvious, not to me. His voice was rough with emotion. I hoped, but I didn't want to assume. Well, now you know. She turned to face him. I love you, Valerio Russo. Not because you saved me or gave me freedom or supported my dreams, but because of who you are, complicated and honest and trying so hard to be better than you were. He pulled her close, his face buried in her hair. I love you too, so much it terrifies me sometimes. Why does it terrify you? Because I've already lost everyone I've loved. My sister, my mother before her. The thought of losing you, his arms tightened around her. I don't think I'd survive it. You're not going to lose me. I signed that second contract, remember? I chose to stay. People can choose to stay and still leave. Death doesn't care about contracts. Livia understood then. He wasn't afraid of her leaving him. He was afraid of fate taking her the way it had taken Julia. I can't promise I'll never die, but I can promise I'll live fully while I'm here. That I'll build a life with you that's worth the risk of eventual loss. He kissed her then, deep and desperate, like he was trying to memorize the feel of her. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. The first time I saw you at that cafe, being harassed by that man, I saw Julia, he said quietly. But now when I look at you, I just see Livia. Not my sister's ghost, not a redemption project. Just the woman I love more than I thought possible. Good, because I'm not interested in being anyone's ghost or project. She smiled. Just your partner. Just my partner, he agreed. In everything. They fell asleep tangled together, and Livia dreamed of the future for the first time in her life. Not with fear or uncertainty, but with genuine hope. The next year brought changes. Livia completed her second year of university with honors, published 3 more stories in literary magazines, and took on an increasingly important role in managing the vineyard's operations. The business grew beyond their expectations, requiring them to hire additional staff and expand their distribution network. Valerio continued his transition away from criminal enterprises, using the vineyard and other legitimate businesses as his primary focus. There were still connections to his old life, people who owed him favors, situations that required his particular brand of problem-solving, but he was careful to keep that world separate from the life he was building with Livia. They traveled together when her class schedule allowed, to wine regions in France and Italy, to literary festivals where Livia networked with other writers, to cities they'd both always wanted to see. Each trip added to their shared history, building memories that belonged only to them. On their second anniversary, counting from the wedding, not from when they'd signed the new contract, Valerio took Livia back to the church where they'd married. Father Antonio met them there, surprised but welcoming. We'd like to renew our vows, Valerio explained. The right way this time. They stood at the same altar where they'd first made promises to each other, but everything was different. No frightened girl and feared criminal. Just 2 people who'd built a real marriage from an unlikely beginning. This time, when Father Antonio said, "You may kiss the bride," Valerio didn't hesitate. He kissed Livia thoroughly, publicly, claiming her not as property, but as partner and equal. The church was empty except for Sofia and Marco as witnesses, but that was how they wanted it. This ceremony wasn't for show or to prove anything to anyone. It was just for them, a recommitment to the life they'd chosen together. Afterward, they walked through the town that had once pitied Livia. People waved, some even offered congratulations. The story had changed in the 2 years since that confrontation at the festival. Now they were known as the couple who'd made an arranged marriage work, who'd built something real from unusual circumstances. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was close enough. Back at the villa, Valerio had one more surprise. He led Livia to a room she'd never entered before, kept locked since she'd arrived. When he unlocked it, she found a fully equipped writing studio, desk, comfortable chair, bookshelves, windows overlooking the garden. "I've been working on this for months," he said. "You've been writing at the desk in our room, or in the library, but I wanted you to have your own space, a room that's entirely yours." Livia walked through the studio, running her hands over the carefully chosen furniture, The perfect lighting, the bulletin board already mounted on the wall for notes and inspiration. It was exactly what she would have designed for herself if she'd known to ask. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Thank you. There's something else." He handed her a folder. Inside were documents for a small publishing house he'd purchased. "It's struggling right now, needs new management and direction. I thought maybe you'd want to run it, turn it into something that publishes the kind of stories that matter to you." Livia stared at the papers, overwhelmed. "You bought me a publishing house?" "I bought a business that needs someone with vision and passion to make it succeed. Whether that's you or someone else is your choice." He paused. "But yes, I bought it thinking you might want it. This is..." She couldn't find words big enough. "This is incredible. You published your first story 2 years ago in a small magazine. Why not publish other writers' first stories too? Build something that gives opportunities to voices that might otherwise go unheard?" The vision he was offering took her breath away. She could finish her degree, write her own stories, and help other writers get their start. Could build something meaningful from both her education and her experience. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I want to do this." They spent the evening planning, Valerio sharing what he knew about the publishing house's current state while Livia sketched out ideas for how to transform it. It was the same kind of partnership they'd developed with the vineyard, combining his business acumen with her creative vision to build something neither could create alone. That night, lying in bed after making love and planning futures, Livia realized she'd stopped thinking about the contract altogether, stopped mentally keeping track of her legal right to leave. It had been months since she'd even looked at the document she'd once kept locked in her desk drawer. She didn't need the safety of that escape clause anymore. She was here because she wanted to be, building a life she'd chosen freely. "What are you thinking about?" Valerio asked, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "How far we've come. How different this is from what I expected." "Better or worse?" "Better. So much better." She turned to face him. "Do you ever regret it? Marrying me instead of just paying off my mother's debts anonymously?" "Never. Not even for a moment." His expression was serious. "You've made me better, Livia. Made me want to be better. That's worth everything." "You made yourself better. I just gave you a reason to try." "We made each other better," he corrected. "That's what love does." They fell asleep holding each other, two people who'd started as strangers in an arranged marriage and became partners in every sense of the word. The legal contract that had once defined their relationship was irrelevant now, replaced by choice and commitment and the deep knowledge that they belonged together. 3 years after their wedding, Livia graduated from university with honors. Valerio, Sofia, Marco, Carmen, and a handful of professors Livia had grown close to attended the ceremony. When they called her name, Livia walked across the stage in her cap and gown and accepted her diploma with pride. The girl who'd thought university was an impossible dream had just earned her degree in literature and creative writing. The publishing house was thriving under her management. She'd rebranded it as Crossroads Press because everyone's story began at a crossroads, a moment of choice that changed everything. They specialized in debut authors, particularly those whose voices had been marginalized or overlooked. The press was small but respected, punching above its weight in critical acclaim. Livia had also completed her first novel, a story about a girl who thought she was being sold but was actually being freed. It was fiction, transformed enough that no one would recognize the truth beneath it, but it was also deeply personal. Crossroads Press would publish it in the fall. The vineyard had expanded to 3 times its original size, producing award-winning wines that were served in Michelin-starred restaurants across Europe. Valerio had successfully transitioned almost entirely to legitimate business, though Livia knew there were still shadows in his past that occasionally demanded attention. But those shadows touched their life less and less. They'd built something clean and good and sustainable, multiple businesses, a home full of love, a partnership that balanced both their strengths. On the evening after Livia's graduation, they hosted a dinner at the villa for everyone who'd supported her journey. Carmen brought her fiancé, Father Antonio came with gifts and blessings, Teresa arrived with a specially made dress for the occasion, and Sofia and Marco beamed like proud parents. As the evening wound down and guests departed, Livia and Valerio found themselves alone in the garden, standing beneath the olive trees where they'd had so many important conversations. "Do you remember the first dinner we had here?" Livia asked. "When you told me about Julia? I remember thinking you were brave for asking difficult questions, for not pretending the complexity wasn't there. I was terrified that night, terrified of you, terrified of the choice I'd made, terrified of everything. And now I'm just grateful." She leaned into his embrace. "For all of it. Even the scary parts, because they led here." Valerio was quiet for a moment, then spoke softly. "I've been thinking about something, about expanding the foundation." He'd established a foundation 2 years ago, officially to support education and small businesses, but Livia knew its real purpose was to help women escape abusive situations. It operated quietly, offering legal assistance, temporary housing, job training, and financial support to women who needed a way out. It was his way of saving more people like Julia, like Livia herself, of turning his guilt into action. "What kind of expansion?" Livia asked. "I want to create a scholarship program for women from difficult backgrounds who want to pursue higher education but don't have the means. Full tuition, living expenses, everything they need to succeed." He paused. "I thought maybe you'd want to help run it. Interview applicants, select recipients, mentor them through their studies?" Livia pulled back to look at him. "You want me to help other women the way you helped me?" "I want us to help them together. Your experience, my resources, combined to make a real difference." The vision was beautiful, taking their story of rescue and choice and using it to help others write better endings to their own stories. Livia felt tears building, but didn't try to stop them. "Yes," she said, "absolutely yes." They spent the next months building the program, establishing criteria and processes, spreading word through social services and domestic violence organizations. Applications came in slowly at first, then faster as word spread. Reading those applications broke Livia's heart and reminded her how lucky she'd been. So many women trapped by circumstances, dreaming of education and independence but seeing no path forward. She interviewed dozens of applicants, heard stories that echoed her own experience, and selected the first 10 scholarship recipients. Watching those women walk into universities with funding secured and support systems in place felt like redemption, not for Livia, who'd already found her peace, but for every girl who didn't get the chance Julia never had. 5 years after their wedding, Livia stood in the music room playing a simple piece on the piano, not expertly, but competently. She'd kept her promise to learn, taking lessons weekly and practicing daily. The room that had been silent for so long was now full of music again. Valerio listened from the doorway, and when she finished, he applauded quietly. "Julia would have loved that," he said. "I play for both of you, her memory and your present." He crossed the room and sat beside her on the bench. Together, they played a duet he'd been teaching her, his skilled fingers compensating for her less experienced ones, creating something beautiful from their combined effort. It was a metaphor for their entire relationship, really. Two people from different worlds, different experiences, different skill sets, combining to create something neither could make alone. When the piece ended, they sat in comfortable silence, hands still resting on the keys. "I never thanked you properly," Livia said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me. That day at the cafe, when that man was touching me and I was just enduring it. You saw me when I was invisible to everyone else." "You were never invisible, Livia. You were just surrounded by people who chose not to look." "Well, you looked, and you decided to do something about it." She turned to face him. "You gave me a choice when I had none. That changed everything." "You changed everything," Valerio corrected. "You took the choice I offered and built something extraordinary with it. That was all you." "It was us," she insisted. "Everything good in my life now exists because you gave me the foundation to build it, but also because you trusted me to build it myself instead of trying to control the outcome." He kissed her gently. "I love you, Mrs. Russo. I love you too, even when you're being a criminal mastermind." "Reformed criminal mastermind," he corrected with a smile. "Mostly reformed?" "I'll take mostly." He pulled her closer. "It's better than I was. Better than I thought I could be." They sat together on the piano bench. in the room that had once held only grief, but now held music and memory and the promise of futures yet unwritten. Outside the windows, the vineyard stretched across the hills, heavy with grapes almost ready for harvest. The publishing house in the city was preparing for its fall launch. The scholarship program was accepting applications for its second year. And in this room, two people who'd started as strangers held each other and understood that love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect circumstances. It was about daily choices, consistent care, and the willingness to build something real from whatever materials life provided. Livia had been given freedom as a gift. She'd chosen love as her response. And together, she and Valerio had built a life that honored both freedom and commitment, independence and partnership, the complex understanding that sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected places. The marriage that began with a document guaranteeing her right to leave had become something she never wanted to walk away from. Not because she was trapped, but because she was home. And home, it turned out, was a choice she made every single day, a choice she would keep making for the rest of her life. The piano keys gleamed in the afternoon light, waiting for the next song. Livia placed her hands in position, feeling the smooth ivory beneath her fingers, and began to play again. The notes filled the room, spilled out into the hallway, floated through the villa that had become her sanctuary and her kingdom. Valerio joined her, his hands finding their place beside hers, and together they created music from the keys that had been silent for so long. Creating beauty from pain, hope from grief, love from an unlikely beginning. And in that moment, with the sun streaming through the windows and the music rising around them, Livia understood that freedom and love weren't opposites. They were partners, each making the other more meaningful. She was free to leave. She chose to stay. And that choice, made freely every day, was the greatest gift she'd ever given herself. The music swelled, filling every corner of the room, and Livia smiled, truly, completely, joyfully smiled, because she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Home,